Chapter 226. Chi Feng also smiled and said, "It's just some novelty." Third sister-in-law, what good things have you not seen in the Wangfu? I'm just showing my incompetence. He paused and said, "To tell you the truth, I heard that something happened in the Wangfu." Since Chi Feng had already said so, he must have heard the ins and outs of the matter. He and Xiao Xiao were martial brothers, and he was also helping Xiao Xiao in the matters of the 100 Zhang Tower. Naturally, he had a lot of friendship with the Genie Guard. Since he was a member of the Genie Guard, he must stand on the side of the Genie Guard. For this matter, Chi Feng might also be on the side of Jiner. Jiang Yuan smiled faintly and said, "Oh, is it possible that you are also here to denounce me?" After all, the matter of the dew had a great impact on her. Usually, she would speak in a gentle manner. Perhaps it was because she was not in a good mood these days, or because Chi Feng was also an acquaintance. There was no need to put on a mask in front of an acquaintance. Therefore, there was some sarcasm in her words. Chi Feng pointed to the stone table in the courtyard and said, "Why don't we sit down and have a chat?" Jiang Yuan nodded and the two sat down in front of the stone table in the courtyard. Lian Xiao served tea and snacks and retreated to the side. Jiang Yuan looked at the tea. She still had a smile on her face, but her tone was a little cold. Could it be that Chi Feng also thinks that this matter is all my servant's fault, and that I also sent people to destroy Miss Liao's purity? According to third sister-in-law's character, it is very likely that she would do such a thing. Chi Feng smiled and stroked his chin. Now, he had shaved off all his beard, but he still retained his original habit. This action was a little abrupt, but he obviously did not feel it. He still looked at Jiang Ruan's unchanging expression with a smile and said, "But if third sister-in-law made a move, how could she let Miss Liao escape? Third sister-in-law's methods have never failed. So, the person behind this can't be third sister-in-law." Jiang Yuan also laughed. "What you mean is that I'm a bad person, but I'm a very bad person. Do you mean that I don't have the qualifications to be a bad person with a compassionate heart?" "No, no," Chi Feng quickly waved his hand and said, "I'm saying that third sister-in-law is brave and fierce, and her work is flawless. Such a lousy and flawed plan is definitely not made by third sister-in-law." When Jiang Yuan heard this, she looked at him with a smile that was not a smile and said, "Are you trying to curry favor with me by saying this? Aren't you afraid that this matter will reach the ears of the Brocade Guard? There is no such thing as a two-faced person." Chi Feng sighed. "Am I, Chi Feng, a two-faced fence-sitter in third sister-in-law's eyes?" Chi Feng smiled proudly. "Since third sister-in-law and the Genie Guards are on opposite sides, I will unconditionally stand on your side. We have done a big thing together, we have some friendship in times of adversity. Third sister-in-law, rest assured, I am an absolutely loyal person." Looking at Jiang Yuan smiling without saying anything, but her expression was obviously much softer than before, Chi Feng sighed in his heart and continued, "But third sister-in-law, have you ever thought about the person behind this matter?" "The person behind this?" Jiang Yuan said faintly, "I want to investigate, but now that your third brother is not in the Fu every day, I have nothing to say to him about this matter. After all, the Brocade Guard is his people, I can't order them around. Moreover, if his people can't find the person, how can I find him? After all, it was not me who did it. Maybe it was just that woman's own play." Play? Chi Feng was a little speechless. Although this is also very likely, reputation for a woman is more important than her life. If that Miss Liao really played such a play, wouldn't it be too much of a sacrifice for her? This is a losing business. A losing business? Jiang Yuan smiled lightly. "So, men and women always see things differently. Reputation is indeed important for a woman, but if she can get what she wants, then reputation is not important, and the sacrifice is worth it. Although this may seem like a self-destructive move in your eyes, as the days go by, you will slowly realize that this is not harmful to her at all. Even if she is criticized by others, it will only be a bit of irrelevant gossip. If you say so, then that woman has gained? But I still don't understand." Chi Feng was a little confused. Jiang Ruan glanced at him. Even if Qi Feng was extremely intelligent and showed off his skills in the court, the rear courtyard and the front court were after all different battlefields. Men could never distinguish a woman's scheming mind. If Qi Feng thought so, then Xiao Xiao and Jean Eyre's thoughts could be imagined. Perhaps this was the difference between men and women. She smiled slightly. Well, let me ask you, what is the background of that Miss Liao now? Her parents are dead, and she is alone. She carries the family's wealth, and her relatives are eyeing her covetously. Qi Feng thought about it and added a few more sentences. Now, the only thing she can rely on is her marriage with Jean Eyre. That's right, if you are her, what other path do you have now? Jiang Ruan asked. Jean Eyre was speechless and mumbled, "Third sister-in-law, I am not a woman." Your analogy is too strange. Jiang Ruan did not respond to his words and continued, for such a weak woman who carries the family's wealth, if she wants to keep it and not be shaken by her relatives, the only way is to find a good backer. Jean Eyre's family background and mansion are not bad. For Liao Meng, there is no better choice than Jean Eyre. To put it bluntly, if she passes this village, she will not be able to find this shop. Naturally, Liao Meng will hold on tightly to this opportunity. For those who want to cross the mountain, no matter how many choices there are, their ultimate goal is to cross the mountain. Similarly, if Liao Meng wants to marry into Jean Eyre's fu, no matter what she does, no matter what sacrifices she has to make, as long as she can get what she wants in the end, this transaction is not considered a loss. Qi Feng listened without blinking. Jiang Ruan's voice was soft and sweet-sounding, but it was very clear and calm. Okay, let's take a look at the possible consequences of this matter. Now that the matter of Liao Meng being molested has been spread to everyone in the capital, everyone knows that she is a victim and a person to be pitied. Jean Eyre has not cancelled his marriage with her, so he has a good reputation in the capital. Even if there are people who say that Liao Meng is not worthy of Jean Eyre, it is only a very small number. In the future, when Jean Eyre and Liao Meng are married, they will say that they are a match made in heaven. On the contrary, Dezhu and I are now villains. Since Jean Eyre suspects that I am the one who did this, he will have more contact with Liao Meng. Qi Feng, tell me, it is just sacrificing one's reputation. At worst, a small number of people will say bad things about her, but she can get the blessings of everyone, the pity of her husband, and completely kill the woman who was previously involved with her husband. Is this transaction still considered a loss for Miss Liao? Qi Feng had long been stunned by what he heard. After a moment, he smiled bitterly and shook his head. I originally thought that I was smart, but younger sister is like a fool in front of third sister-in-law. Now it seems that it is not third sister-in-law, but that Miss Liao can almost play me in the palm of her hand. To actually use her own reputation as a bargaining chip, that Miss Liao is really not an ordinary person. As Qi Feng thought about this, he suddenly looked at Jiang Ruan and said, but third sister-in-law, since you have already seen through her intentions, according to what you said, it may indeed be a trap set by Liao Meng. Why not tell third brother about this? Jiang Ruan lowered her eyes. Why tell him? Xiao Xiao is a confident person, he has his own judgment. Since he has his own judgment, how can he believe what others say? It will only add to his troubles. Third sister-in-law, what you said is wrong. Qi Feng interrupted her words. You know that third brother is not such a person. Third sister-in-law, I think you are unwilling. Although Qi Feng was not as good at guessing people's minds as Jiang Ruan, after being with Jiang Ruan for so long, he had roughly figured out Jiang Ruan's character. Jiang Ruan was a somewhat awkward person. It was normal for a husband and wife to meet for the first time. She was not willing to bow her head, and even refused to explain. This might be another kind of arrogance. If it was someone who was thick-skinned and said good words, they would be reconciled after a little coaxing. However, the other party was a taciturn person like Xiao Xiao. Thinking about this, Qi Feng was also a little depressed. Jiang Ruan saw through his thoughts and pretended to be angry. You are not saying good words for Liao Meng, but for Xiao Xiao. If you are saying good words for him, forget it as soon as possible. I have no time to accompany you to drink tea. Hey, Chi Feng quickly touched his nose and said, "No, no, how can I be such a person? What I mean is, third brother is too unreasonable. Third sister-in-law, don't be angry. Look at the little thing I brought for you." Chi Feng went to open the box on the side. There was a wooden carved round box in the box. Jiang Ruan took it and only saw that the round box was carved with a small person. The lid on the box could be opened, so she subconsciously opened it. Immediately, a smooth sound of music came out. She was shocked and looked at Chi Feng inquiringly. Chi Feng smiled and said, "My friend just came back from the sea. This thing is from a Western country. It is called the 8 music box. There is the sound of music in it. Interesting, right?" Jiang Ruan could not help but laugh. In fact, in her previous life and this life, she was in a different place. Although she did not have the opportunity to own some exquisite things, she had seen many rare treasures. It was just that the thing that Chi Feng found in a different way was different. This thing was not expensive, but it was novel and interesting, which was rare. Chi Feng had been here for so long, and finally saw that Jiang Ruan's smile was not polite and gentle, but from the heart. He was relieved and said, "Third sister-in-law, do you like it? If you like it, why don't you go there yourself?" He seemed to think of something and said, "He also has a lot of things in the Yibao pavilion. I don't know if third sister-in-law has been there. If you haven't, why don't you go and have a look now? Anyway, the Yibao pavilion belongs to our family. Maybe there is something that will catch your eye." Jiang Ruan was startled. She had not been to the Yibao pavilion for a long time. She knew that it was Xiao Xiao's business. She thought of the time when she went to the Yibao pavilion. At that time, she and Xiao Xiao were not husband and wife. When she went to the Yibao pavilion with Dong Ying'er and Zhao Jin, she was shocked by the price. At that time, she planned to get a precious shield for Jiang Xing. She thought for a while and said to Chi Feng with a smile, "Okay." This time it was Chi Feng's turn to be dumbfounded. He was just joking. After all, Jiang Ruan was now a princess. How could she always walk with an outsider like him? Although her relationship with Xiao Xiao was not close to the point of avoiding suspicion, he always felt that with Jiang Ruan's exquisite mind, she might have discovered his thoughts. Jiang Ruan was a person who could not bear to have sand in her eyes, but she could say the 2 words, "Okay," so calmly. Chi Feng also stared at her blankly for a while and did not speak. "What's wrong?" Jiang Ruan seemed to notice his gaze and said with a smile, "What's wrong? You have something to do, so you are unwilling to go out with me? I will trouble you this time. At worst, I will add in the travel expenses in the future." Chi Feng came back to his senses. He was also a man of character. Jiang Ruan, a woman, was so calm. If he refused again, it would seem a little strange. Moreover, the great Jin dynasty was not so harsh on married women. As long as there was no intimate action, there was no harm in it. Thinking that Jiang Ruan had been in a bad mood in the Fu recently, it was better to go out and relax. He smiled and said, "How would I dare? I will go prepare the carriage." Lian Xiao was still a little hesitant. If Jiang Ruan went out with Chi Feng like this, it would seem that Chi Feng was deliberately trying to poach her. Every time Chi Feng looked at Jiang Ruan, there was a strange look in his eyes. As Jiang Ruan's personal maid, Lian Xiao noticed it and muttered in her heart. Dezhu did not have so many concerns and only said, "Young madam has been trapped in the Fu for a long time. It is good to go out for a walk. Since Master Qi is the son-in-law's friend, he will know what to do." Tianzhu said, "I will protect them. Lian Xiao, you will go with me. Dezhu will stay in the Fu. If you meet Liao Meng on the street, I am afraid there will be trouble." Tianzhu's words had always been short. As a former member of the embroidered uniform guard, Tianzhu surprised everyone by standing firmly on Dewdrop's side. In her opinion, Liao Meng had ulterior motives. This matter was most likely aimed at Dezhu. It was better for Dezhu not to go out these days. Who knew what kind of tricks that woman had up her sleeves? If Dezhu went out, she would not be tricked. Dezhu also knew that Tianzhu was worried about her. Her heart warmed and she agreed with a smile. After they finished packing, they went out of the Fu's main gate. In the room, a young man was sitting in front of a chessboard, playing chess with himself. From a distance, the man's side profile looked very beautiful, especially his sharp chin, which seemed to be full of beauty. His lips were bright red, as if they had just been smeared with rouge. However, when one looked closer, the beauty was destroyed by a pair of green fox eyes. Half of his face was covered with a mask, and he seemed to be staring at the chess game in front of him leisurely. It was unknown when a person appeared in the room and whispered, "Darren, Jiang Ruan and Qi Feng have left the Fu." The room was silent for a long time. The man holding the chessboard held a chess piece in one hand and frowned as he carefully studied the chess game, as if considering where to start. After a while, he smiled slightly, put the chess piece in the center, and said, "Go out." The people in the room quickly retreated. The man looked at the chess game in front of him, and the smile on his lips became more and more charming. It seemed to contain some kind of profound meaning. He stared at the chessboard for a while, then suddenly reached out and flicked his sleeves. The chess pieces on the chessboard were instantly disrupted, and one by one, they fell to the ground, making a crisp sound. The man seemed to enjoy it very much. He closed his eyes and listened quietly. After a long time, he raised his eyes again and looked at the windowsill. There was a pot of orchid on the windowsill. The white petals of the orchid were slightly stretched out, and as if they were alive, they trembled gently. In this gloomy room, it was like a ray of light, exuding a strange fragrance. The man smiled slightly and whispered, "Attacking the heart is the best, a woman." This time, his words were full of contempt. While the capital was filled with rumors and slanders, the palace was strangely calm. The emperor went to court as usual. He reviewed the memorials that needed to be reviewed. He scolded the insensible officials that needed to be scolded and beheaded those that needed to be beheaded. He promoted the officials that he liked and rewarded them when they needed to be rewarded. However, some of the more attentive officials realized that the emperor hadn't asked about the affairs of the court for a long time. Now, there were only 2 princes left. In fact, the emperor had even changed his warm attitude towards the 13th prince, Xian Pei. Now, he didn't even care about the other 2 princes. Whether it was in court or in private, the 2 princes seemed to have been forgotten. Therefore, the officials were all confused. Those who had daughters in the palace would think of ways to get them to bring back a message. What was the emperor's intention now? Unexpectedly, the news brought back by the women was even more dismal. Not only the 2 princes, but the emperor also rarely went to the palace. There were very few concubines that could get close to him. Now, other than the ice beauty Mu Shiro, the only one who could get close to the emperor was the little beauty Dong Yinger, but that was only because she was good at cooking. The women in the palace complained that they had let down the palace because of the lack of beauties, but the officials of the previous dynasty smelled something unusual. These officials had seen much of the world. The emperor's seemingly small action might have some hidden meaning, such as his cold treatment of the 2 princes. Although it was strange, the officials would not give up their support for the 2 princes just because of the emperor's cold treatment. Now, it was a gamble. They were afraid that they would choose the wrong side. If they bet correctly, then they would win, and riches would be within reach. Therefore, the requests for the appointment of the crown prince still flew to the emperor's desk like snowflakes. In the room, Mingyu looked at Xian Pei who was sitting in front of the table practicing calligraphy. Now that everyone had chosen their side, and Xian Li was using all kinds of methods, be it forceful or tempting, all in order to win people over to his side, Xian Pei seemed to be abnormally relaxed. Even if the emperor didn't summon him, he was happy to be at ease. All day in the room, he practiced calligraphy and rested, as if he really was a prince. If it weren't for the fact that Mingyu and Chao Yang were Xian Pei's trusted aides and knew of his hidden ambitions, they would have thought that this handsome boy with a face full of smiles really didn't have many plans and was just a slightly intelligent and noble young master. Chapter 227. Mingyu said, Your Highness, today Cabinet Elder Wang and Prime Minister Chiu both sent people to 8th Prince's residence. They stayed for 2 hours before coming out. This is the second time. Xian Pei made a sound of acknowledgement and continued to write his characters in ink without a care. Chaoyang and Mingyue looked at each other. Although palace maids should not discuss matters of their masters, Mingyue and Chaoyang were sent by Xiao Xiao to help Xian Pei, and Mingyue were old people in the palace. Sometimes, the fight for the throne wasn't just a fight between two princes. It was a fight between two forces. If one of them lost, there would still be people supporting him. Thus, the fight for the throne would often end in rivers of blood. The sacrifices and cruelty were all for the sake of that position. Since he was one of Xian Pei's people, he would have to fight with Xianli sooner or later. The day when the two of them would fight each other would come sooner or later. What he had to do now was to increase his chances of winning before that day came. Xian Pei's nonchalant attitude would make anyone who didn't know the situation feel that he was unreliable and not worth following. Compared to Xian Li's large number of followers and aides, Xian Pei's methods of recruiting talents. It should be said that he did not take the initiative to recruit talents. It was always people who wanted to come to him. As a matter of fact, Cabinet Elder Wang and Prime Minister Chiu had always secretly supported Xian Pei. Now that the emperor treated the two princes coldly, Xian Li's troops were growing stronger and stronger, but Xian Pei didn't make any movements. He also didn't offer any benefits to the ministers who came to seek refuge. Over time, those people gradually disappeared. Cabinet Elder Wang and Prime Minister Chiu were originally a large force. From the looks of it, they had already sided with Xian Li. More and more people left on his side, but Xian Li was not anxious at all. Your Highness, Chao Yang was somewhat anxious. Cabinet Elder Wang and Prime Minister Chiu are obviously your people, but they still left like this. This is really burning the bridge after crossing the river. Xian Pei smiled but was not moved. Mingyu was also very puzzled, but she knew that this young man was not a stupid person. His scheming and forbearance were beyond the imagination of ordinary people. There must be a reason why he did this. She said, Your Highness does not seem worried at all. Xian Pei finally finished the last stroke and heaved a sigh of relief. He put down the brush and looked at Mingyu. What doubts do you have? Xian Li's attitude towards her was stricter than towards Chao Yang because she was Xiao Xiao's person. However, he valued her more than Chao Yang because there were many things that he needed her to do. She was agile and could do better. Hearing this, Mingyu knelt down and said, This servant does not understand why Your Highness does not take the initiative to recruit talents, and does not know how to tempt those who come to seek refuge. What I do not understand is that at this critical juncture, the 8th Prince is constantly making moves, but Your Highness only stays in the house and does not make a move. You have too many questions. Xian Pei looked at her and said slowly. He played with the thumb ring on his hand and suddenly smiled. However, Your Highness is in a good mood today, so I can answer you. It's just that Xiao Xiao's people don't even know this little thing. It really broadens my horizons. Xian Pei was always changing his ways to insult Xiao Xiao whenever he had the chance. Mingyu had heard it many times, and treated it as a child's fight, so she did not really take it to heart. Xian Pei saw that Mingyu's expression did not change, and did not get angry. It seemed that he also felt that it was somewhat boring. He coughed and said, Talents are not actively recruited. If I want to contend against Xianli, who do you think I need to support the most? Talents? Mingyu did not speak. At any time, no matter if it was a fight for the throne or not, a wise ruler would always think of ways to select talents. Talents were naturally fought over by the rulers. Xian Pei smiled faintly. Wrong. Talents. The reason why talents are talents is because they need to be appreciated by a wise ruler. This is not a peaceful and prosperous era, nor is it a peaceful world. This is a battle of life and death. If you are not careful, you will lose everything. I think talents are important, but it is not as important as ambition. Ambition? Mingyu asked. Ambition. Xian Pei sat on the chair. His body was thin and weak and had not fully developed. Sitting on the wide chair was somewhat awkward. But his long sleeves flowed down from the chair and covered the floor. His indolence caused Mingyu to be in a trance. She felt that the person sitting in front of her was not a young lad, but a mature and wise man. A thin, hungry wolf and a well-trained hound, Xian Pei said faintly. In the days when there's no need to fight for anything, a smart hound is certainly good, but when it comes to robbing, killing, and robbing, it's probably much better to bring along a thin, hungry wolf. Your so-called talents are hunting dogs, and ambitious people are hungry wolves. What I am facing is a battle of life and death. It is a battle of flesh and blood. Whoever is more ferocious, the more advantageous it is to me. You can use meat to recruit hunting dogs. But for a hungry wolf, you will never use meat to recruit it. Because what it wants, is to kill the other party. Mingyu was silent for a while, then asked. Although a hungry wolf is ferocious, but in the future, it will inevitably develop a bestial nature and devour its master. There will not be such a chance. Xian Pei said. Mingyu was startled. She heard Xian Pei's voice coming from above her. After the prey is dead, there is no need for the hungry wolf to exist. Naturally, it will find an opportunity to kill. Hearing this, Mingyu's body trembled. She did not expect this young lad to be so decisive. He could easily say that the cunning rabbit should be cooked. Although these words were despicable and cruel, it was the best start on the road to becoming an emperor. Xian Pei's courage had already surprised her, but he was still so decisive. Xian Pei looked at the dazed Mingyu. Ambition is only used to deal with enemies. If they have ambitions for what is mine, and secretly covet it, I will destroy their ambitions forever. Qiao Yang, who was standing far away, heard Xian Pei's words. She could not help but feel her heart tighten. She suppressed the pressure in her heart. She had always known that the 13th prince was not simple, but she did not know that his wisdom and methods had already reached the level of a future emperor. His age was no longer a flaw, it could even be an excellent cover. Then why did your highness not name a price? Mingyu asked. If there was a price, wouldn't it be easier to recruit ambitious people? How do you think my forces are compared to Xian Li's? Xian Pei asked. Mingyu was startled, but she quickly regained her senses. She knew that Xian Pei was a person who could see things clearly, and there was no point in lying. She honestly said, the 8th prince's forces are stronger. That's right. His forces are stronger. If I name a price, once he knows the price, he just needs to raise it a little. With his forces, he can also do this. Those who are tempted by my price, when they see a higher price, will definitely follow. On the contrary, wouldn't it be better to wait for the highest price and obtain a priceless treasure? Xian Pei smiled. Let them never know their own value, forever have hope for the future, and work even harder. These people who are bought over priceless treasures are things that Xian Li will never be able to buy with a tangible price. Mingyu seemed to understand, but she did not. Xian Pei continued, do you think that the number of people following Xian Li is increasing? Do you know that this is not a good thing for him? Mingyu nodded, then shook her head. The same amount of money, when divided between two people, will be much more beneficial. There are many people behind Xian Li, but the more people there are, when Xian Li gets what he wants, the smaller the contribution each person will get. On the contrary, there are not many people behind me, and if I succeed in the future, those people will get a larger share of the benefits. In other words, the people standing behind me are all driven by the greater benefits. These people driven by the greater benefits will never be moved by Xian Li's small benefits. Because there is no price, but because of the effort they put in, they will give birth to the idea of gambling. Have you ever seen a person who gives up halfway in gambling? Generally not. The people behind me, everyone has the idea of gambling, so they are the most stable part. Mingyu listened as if she was enlightened, but she was faintly surprised and did not understand. She looked at Xian Pei and said, but Cabinet Elder Wang and Prime Minister Qiu, these are people who are driven by small benefits. Even if they do not leave today, one day they will bring harm to me because of the benefits in front of them. It is better to kick them out early. Such a short-sighted blade, I believe, even if Xianli holds it in his hands, he will not feel happy. Xian Pei suddenly thought of something, and suddenly smiled. Besides, do you think it is a good thing that there are more and more people behind Xianli? I think Father in the palace is really full of anger now. The anger of the Son of Heaven is not something that anyone can bear. Your Majesty. Mingyu was shocked. Right now, the Emperor did not seem to care much about the two princes and did not have much to say about the matter of changing the crown prince. Could it be that he was still secretly paying attention to this matter? Mingyu thought for a moment and said, since His Majesty is paying attention to this matter, I heard from Eunuch Li that there is no end to the impeachment of His Highness regarding the matter in Qing'an County a few days ago. His Majesty is very angry and most likely holds some displeasure towards His Highness. Should we think of a way to refute or find an opportunity to impeach 8th Prince? Before Xian Hua was born, there was a period of time when the Emperor thought highly of Xian Pei. Whenever there was any major matter in court, he would test Xian Pei's opinion. The snowstorm in Qing'an County had been severe. At that time, the Emperor had asked Xian Pei, and Xian Pei had written a memorial on how to deal with the snowstorm. The memorial was written in a standard manner, and there were some novel parts, but it was not overflowing with talent. In the end, it was accepted by the Emperor. As a matter of fact, news had come from Qing'an County a few days ago that Xian Pei's methods had not been of much use. As a result, the 8th Prince's subordinates immediately seized this opportunity to impeach Xian Pei on the grounds that he was young and playful, using the important matters of the people's lives as a joke. Naturally, there were old officials who had followed the Emperor for many years. Every memorial they wrote was full of heartache and hatred. Those who did not know would think that Xian Pei had committed some heinous crime. However, being impeached by so many people would inevitably leave a bad impression on the Emperor. When Mingyu thought of this, she still felt uneasy. Go and arrange a few people. Tell the people on my side to send me the memorials as well. Xian Pei shook his sleeves carelessly. Impeach 8th Prince as well? Chao Yang could not help but ask. Her expression was one of joy. In her opinion, the 8th Prince's subordinates had not been right to hit him when he was down. Unexpectedly, Xian Pei shook his head and said, impeach me. What? Chao Yang cried out in shock. She immediately realized that she had overstepped her boundaries. She hurriedly knelt down and begged for forgiveness. Mingyu also frowned, not understanding why Xian Pei had done this. Xian Pei smiled and slowly moved his lips. Mingyu froze and felt a chill run down her spine. She raised her eyes to look at the young man sitting on the throne. Half of the young man's body was submerged in the soft cushion as he carelessly supported his chin with his hand. The sunlight outside the window dimmed and half of the young man's body fell into the shadows. He was like a silent stone statue, sturdy and heavy. He was like a lonely and cruel emperor sitting on a high throne separated by layers of curtains, green tiles and glazed glass. A true emperor. He smiled and said, everyone submit to Xianli. Let him see who the world belongs to. The sun set in the west in the blink of an eye. In the early spring, the sky darkened early. Jiang Ruan and Qi Feng went out of the small shop on the street and returned to the Wang Fu. Perhaps it was because Jiang Ruan had not been out for a long time, or perhaps it was because Qi Feng was a humorous person, the two of them got along very well. Not only did they visit the Yibao Gu, they also visited the other shops. Previously, during the wedding, she had also gone to take a look at the shops that Xian Pei had given her. Jiang Ruan did not have any other thoughts. Although Xian Pei had given these shops to her, she currently did not lack money. She only wanted to manage them well and return them to Xian Pei in the future. If one day Xian Pei really sat in that position, even if he did not sit in that position, his environment was destined to make him need these things more than Jiang Ruan. In Jiang Ruan's eyes, Xian Pei would always be her child. They visited the shop together with Qi Feng and bought some things. They even ate something in the shop outside before returning. When they returned to the gate of the Fu, it was already very late. Qi Feng held a pile of trivial things in his hands, which were all bought by Jiang Yuan today. In order to avoid suspicion, the two of them did not take the carriage. Jiang Yuan did not know why today she was in high spirits and bought a lot of things. It had to be said that now that she was not short of money, it was really refreshing to buy things. In this way, all the heavy work fell to Qi Feng. Qi Feng hugged all the things. When they reached the gate of the Fu, Jiang Yuan smiled and said, "Give them to me. You have worked hard today."
Usually, Xiao Xiao went out during the day, and when he came back at night, Jiang Yuan would already be asleep. Naturally, there was no chance to talk. Who knew that Xiao Xiao would come back so early today? After Jiang Yuan washed up, she did not see Xiao Xiao in the room. When she asked Tianzhu said that Xiao Xiao was in the study. She did not know what Xiao Xiao had been busy with these past few days. Perhaps he really had something to do in the study. But today, something like this happened again. It seemed a little strange for Xiao Xiao to go to the study at this time. Xiao Xiao was probably sulking. In the past, Jiang Yuan thought that Xiao Xiao was a little cute, but after experiencing the matter with Jin Er and Lu Zhu, she subconsciously thought that Xiao Xiao did not trust her. No woman could accept her husband doubting her, especially when it came to his innocence. Jiang Yuan also had a stubborn temper. She only made a sound of agreement and went to sleep first. She had no intention of going to the study to talk. However, housekeeper Lin, who was full of hope, waited outside the room for her to reconcile with Jiang Yuan, waited in vain for the whole night. It was night. Above the Yao family's mansion in the capital, heavy curtains were stacked on top of each other, and the bamboo and wood gave off a faint glow. In the courtyard of the Yao family's young miss, the sweet sound of a zither floated out. Every part of this courtyard was decorated beautifully and exquisitely. Everywhere was a display of elegance. Even the carp sculpture by the side of the pond was vivid and lifelike. This courtyard had originally been created by the Yao family's young miss, Yao Niannian. Master Yao obviously had high expectations for craftsmen, which was why such an exquisite courtyard had been created. This also indirectly showed that this Yao Niannian was certainly the apple of Governor Yao's eye, which was why he had so ostentatiously fulfilled her long-cherished wish. At this moment, the sound of the zither in the courtyard matched the scenery in the courtyard. Yao Niannian was extraordinarily intelligent, and she had always been proficient in the 4 arts. It was just that she was not very proficient in them. If Jiang Su had been the talented woman of the capital, then Yao Niannian would have been the most intelligent woman in everyone's hearts. The most intelligent woman might not have been the best in the 4 arts, but inexplicably, she was more respected than the talented woman. 2 servant girls standing far away were quietly discussing, "This song is really beautiful. How come I've never heard young miss play it before?" "Stupid," the other servant girl said in a low voice, "it must have been created by herself. Our young miss has always been intelligent." If this sound of the zither were to spread outside, I think that the title of the number 1 zither maiden in the capital would have to be given to someone else.
What nonsense are you talking about? What kind of status does that zither maiden have? How could she be mentioned in the same breath as our young miss? The smaller servant girl said, "In recent years, young miss seems to like playing the zither in the courtyard more and more. I don't know why, could it be?" She thought of something and hurriedly shut her mouth, but her expression was one of uncontrollable worry. In a pavilion in the courtyard, a woman's long sleeves fluttered in the wind. The corners of her robe were turned up to reveal tiny, dazzling, and exquisite silk patterns. A pair of slender hands flew up and down the strings of the zither. The melody was like the tinkling of spring water, pleasing to the ears, and seemed to be able to play into one's heart. After a while, the song ended, but Yao Niannian did not withdraw her hands. Her jade-like, stuttering hands were still on the zither. Her brows were calm, but there was something in her eyes that could not be described clearly, as if it could penetrate into one's heart. The corners of her lips curled up as she looked at the zither in front of her. However, she seemed to have thought of something else. Among the ashes on the ground, there was a piece of paper that had been used to practice calligraphy. Yao Nianyan had always demanded perfection from herself. Among the ashes, there seemed to be something else. It was just that the unfamiliar handwriting had been mixed in with the ashes and vanished along with the fire, leaving nothing behind. Yao Nianyan slowly opened her mouth to speak. It was not clear whether she was speaking to someone else or herself. Heart like a boulder, heart like a boulder. When two boulders collide, 200 will be injured. Jiang Ruan, a person who can guess people's hearts. Her smile gradually gave rise to a sense of contempt. What a joke. In this world, there were indeed people who could play with people's hearts. Originally, she had thought that since Jiang Ruan was so famous, she would naturally have something special about her. Now, it seemed that it was nothing more than a false rumor. That woman could not withstand a single blow, and was really nothing to be afraid of. There were many dark places in a person's heart. Perhaps it was harmless, but when those dark places were infinitely magnified, under the right opportunity, it could lead to irreparable mistakes. The bait has been cast, the small shrimp has also been hooked up. Yao Nianyan stretched out a hand and lightly stroked the zither strings. However, when she reached the last string, her hand suddenly exerted force, and the zither let out a sharp cry before it snapped. Yao Nianyan unhurriedly plucked the short string and smiled faintly. You may begin. Chapter 228. Early the next morning, Jiang Ruan had just eaten breakfast and had yet to reach the study when someone from the gatehouse came to report that he was carrying a bundle in his hand. He only said that it was for the master of Jinying Wang Fu. When she asked who it was, the gatehouse could not answer and only said that it seemed to be the carriage of the Mo family Fu. This Mo family was naturally Mo Tsong's Fu in the capital. The master of Jinying Wang Fu was indeed Xiao Xiao, but now that Jiang Ruan was in charge, the gatehouse did not hesitate and handed it over to Jiang Ruan. Jiang Ruan returned to the study and threw the bundle on the desk. However, Tianzhu said, "Young madam, why don't you open it? If there are other important matters, it would not be good to delay it." In Tianzhu's view, if Mo Tsong came to deliver something, it was probably related to official business. Jiang Ruan was not an ignorant housewife. There were some things that she could deal with very well. Now was a troubled time and time was very precious. Xiao Xiao would probably return late at night, so it was better for Jiang Ruan to open it now and see what it was. Lian Xiao also hurriedly said, "Yes, young madam, after all, it is a matter of the Fu." Lian Xiao's thoughts were not as profound as Tianzhu's. She only thought that Jiang Ruan and Xiao Xiao were somewhat estranged and could not continue to be so indifferent. This matter might be an opportunity. Jiang Ruan thought for a moment, then brought the bundle in front of her eyes and slowly opened it. There was nothing in the bundle, only a coat. This coat was a jet-black embroidered robe. The corner of the robe was embroidered with a dark golden qilin. It was Xiao Xiao's robe. Next to the robe was a letter. Mo Tsong returning Xiao Xiao's robe for no reason was a strange matter. Moreover, there was also a letter. Jiang Ruan did not hesitate and opened the letter at the side. When the letter was unfolded, there were only two simple words on it: "Many thanks." It was the graceful small regular script that women often used, but the handwriting was neat and full of charm. With just a superficial glance, one could already feel that it was a good handwriting. It was just a letter of thanks, but the handwriting was already so unusual. The content itself was also very thought-provoking. As soon as Dewdrop saw it, her expression changed greatly. She had no choice but to think about it. Perhaps she would have found it strange in the past, but now, when she saw these things, she could not help but have a thought. With Jean Eyre as an example, how could she not be nervous? Her expression changed immediately. Tianzhu's gaze also moved, but he did not speak. Lian Xiao opened her mouth, obviously not knowing how to deal with the current situation. Before the three of them could open their mouths, they saw Jiang Yuan pick up the robe and slowly bring it to the tip of her nose. Lian Xiao and Lu Zhu stared at her nervously. Although Tian Zhu's expression was not as nervous as Lian Xiao and Lu Zhu, she did not even blink, refusing to miss a single expression from Jiang Yuan. After a moment, Jiang Yuan put down Xiao Xiao's robe. From beginning to end, her expression had not changed. She threw the robe back into the bundle and asked Lu Zhu, "Where is the gift for the general Fu that I prepared a few days ago?" A few days ago, the Zhao family's third mistress had a pregnancy pulse. Zhao Feizhou was already so old, yet the third mistress was still pregnant. This was a matter that made the entire General Fu happy. When the good news came, Jiang Yuan also ordered people to prepare the gift and was prepared to personally make a trip. But recently, she had almost forgotten about this matter. Lu Zhu was surprised. "It has already been prepared. It is exactly according to the gift list that Steward Lin gave. Does Miss want to take a look now?" "No need." Jiang Yuan stood up. "Let's go to the General Fu today." Lian Xiao's heart thumped. Obviously, she had faintly guessed in the direction that Lu Zhu was thinking. Although there was some hesitation, Jiang Yuan did not wait for them to speak and took the lead to leave. The few of them looked at each other. Finally, it was Tian Zhu who walked forward and stood in front of the desk. She hesitated for a moment before reaching out to pick up the robe. She imitated Jiang Yuan and waved it under her nose. "What is it?" Lian Xiao asked anxiously. Tian Zhu's brows were tightly knitted, but she did not seem to fully understand. She asked with slight doubt, "Orchid?" Just like that, Jiang Yuan left the door. Steward Lin was angry but did not dare to say anything. He probably wanted to go forward and dissuade her, but in the end, when he saw Jiang Yuan's cold expression, he did not dare to go forward. In the end, he could only shrink behind the vermilion pillar of the Wang Fu's main gate and use his fingers to scratch the paint. Jin Si stood at the side with his arms crossed. Watching Steward Lin's actions, he could not help but say, "Hey, old Lin, if this pillar is scratched, will it be deducted from your salary to repair it?" Steward Lin's actions stopped abruptly, but he immediately put on a stern face and lectured, "What do you know? This old man is just worried. You, little girl, do not understand. How can you share this old man's worries? All day long, you don't know what you should do and only know how to make noise." In the end, he was lecturing Jin Si. Jin Si was stunned for a moment and did not know whether to laugh or cry. "Is there a need for you to be so nervous? Young madam is only going to the General Fu. It's just a trip to her maiden home. Why do you act as if something big happened? Those who don't know would think that something happened to young madam. That's why I said that you're blind." Steward Lin clasped his hands behind his back and looked at her.
"Do you know why young madam returned to the General's Fu?" "I do. Third young madam of the Zhao family is pregnant, so young madam went to congratulate her." "This is a joyous occasion," Jin Si replied. "If she really wanted to congratulate her, why would young madam wait until you arrived? She would have brought young master back with her a long time ago. Today, when she returned, it was obvious that she went back to her maiden home in a fit of pique after an argument. I heard from Lian Xiao last night that it really made me anxious." As Steward Lin spoke, he became a little angry. Everything was fine, but he angered his wife all the way to her maiden home. Young master really hasn't learned any of my cleverness. Women need to be coaxed. I don't think he's willing to coax her anymore. Hearing this, Jin Si began to ponder seriously. He looked at Steward Lin and said, "Speaking of which, I also feel that too many things have happened recently. First, it was Jean Eyre and Lu Zhu. Now, it's young madam and young master. This is quite a coincidence, but I don't know how it all happened. Is it because the feng shui is bad? Let's hurry up and have someone go to the temple to burn the incense of marriage. This Fu cannot tolerate such a thing." Steward Lin also expressed his agreement. On the other side, Jiang Yuan brought Tian Zhu and a few others to the General Fu. Her arrival was also very sudden, and she did not have any plans for the invitation. She did not even let the manservant go to greet her eldest brother in advance. However, the Zhao family members were still very happy to see her, especially the few grandmothers of the Zhao family, who happily went out to welcome her. Jiang Yuan ordered people to carry the gift for the third daughter-in-law out. Naturally, there would not be a lack of guests. Everyone in the third branch was courteous, and the gift had been written very thoughtfully. No one could find any fault with it, and it was very generous. This was Steward Lin's handiwork. Steward Lin had always been good at writing gifts. When the eldest grandmother led Jiang Yuan into the fu, she first wanted to see the master of the fu, Zhao Guang. However, Zhao Guang was not in the main hall. The eldest grandmother smiled and said, "Father is playing chess in the backyard. R1, follow me." When she really led them to the backyard, Jiang Yuan was slightly startled. This was because the person playing chess with Zhao Guang was Jiang Xing. The two of them had not seen each other for a long time. Ever since the end of the year, Jiang Yuan had been busy helping Xian Pei gain a firm foothold. Jiang Xing's daily official duties in the military camp were also rather busy. Perhaps it was because of Zhao Jin, but he did not have to keep Jiang Yuan under his eyes like he used to do in the past. Thus, this meeting between the siblings was rather sudden. However, it was obvious that feelings would not grow distant just because of the distance.
When Jiang Xing saw Jiang Yuan, he immediately ignored his unfinished chess game and stood up to take large strides towards Jiang Yuan. He said happily, "R1, why did you suddenly come? Why didn't you find someone to tell us in advance?" Zhao Guang was so angry that he stomped his feet behind him. "Stinky brat, hurry up and come back. This game is not over yet, where are you going to run off to?" "That's enough, grandfather," another voice interrupted, "with your lousy chess game, only cousin Gu has the patience to play chess with you. So what if it's over? In the end, it's still a loss." Zhao Guang could not tolerate others saying that he was not good at chess, so he immediately scowled at Zhao Feizhou and scolded him. However, Zhao Feizhou made a funny face and ran away like a wisp of smoke. Zhao Feizhou's temperament was 100% inherited from Zhao Yuanfeng's temperament. In short, he was a rash and reckless person. Zhao Guang did not chase after him. When he saw Jiang Yuan, he coughed, unable to suppress the joy in his eyes. "Yuan girl, you're back." Jiang Yuan nodded and stepped forward to exchange greetings. The satisfied expression on Zhao Guang's face deepened. In all fairness, although Jiang Yuan did not spend much time at the general's fu, this was actually more beneficial to the general's fu. Maintaining an appropriate amount of time would not bring any trouble to the general's fu. Although her attitude was usually polite and distant, the gifts she gave during the New Year and other festivals were always very thoughtful. It was said that one's intentions could be seen from a person's gift list. It was from these gifts that one could not pick out anything wrong with. It really made one unable to get angry. One would only feel that this young lady was compromising to protect them, and that she was only doing this. On the contrary, it made one feel even closer to Jiang Yuan and feel sorry for her. Of course, the people of the general's fu naturally did not know that every gift list was drawn up by housekeeper Lin. In their opinion, Jiang Yuan was exceptionally intelligent, so it was not strange that the gift list came from her. However, it was somewhat impossible for a housekeeper to draw up such a gift list. One must know that drawing up a gift list was not an easy task. Many young ladies of noble families began to learn how to manage a household by drawing up a gift list. If it was done well, they might be able to establish a good relationship. If it was not done well, they might miss out on an important opportunity to climb up the ranks. After Zhao Guang and Jiang Yuan spoke, Madame Li came over again. She pulled her into the main hall and could not help but ask about the recent situation. Madame Li truly loved Jiang Yuan. She had doubled the amount of regret she had with Zhao Mei to compensate Jiang Yuan. Zhao Yulong and Zhao Yi had also returned. Zhao San was somewhat surprised. Originally, she had thought that Jiang Yuan would not come, but today, she had suddenly come. The entire Zhao family had gathered together. Madame Li was very happy and ordered people to go to the kitchen to prepare more dishes. However, Zhao Yuanping asked, "Ruan girl, why did Xiao Wanye not accompany you today?" Everyone looked at Jiang Ruan. Jiang Ruan smiled and said, "He is very busy. Today, I suddenly came on a whim. I will have to ask him to come and meet grandfather and grandmother another day." Xiao Xiao was indeed very busy. The Zhao family all attended court, and they knew that he had always been busy in the capital. He was not in the capital all year round, so Zhao Yuanping did not ask any more questions. When it was time to eat, the whole family toasted each other and it was very lively. Jiang Ruan sat in the middle of them and was slightly absent-minded. These past few days, the atmosphere in Jining Wang Fu had been foul and chaotic. Whether it was the brocade guards, the maidservants by her side, or even herself. The lively and amiable atmosphere in front of others formed a sharp contrast with the cold and distant atmosphere behind others. She had never felt it before, but now, she could feel the difference more and more. Perhaps she did not know when, but her heart had also begun to be warmed by others, at least towards those who were close to her. While eating, Madame Li asked tentatively, "Ruan, it is getting late today. Why don't you not go back tonight?" Her words were said with some caution. She stared at Jiang Ruan's expression without blinking, and her gaze was filled with unconcealable expectation. Jiang Ruan suddenly smiled and said, "Okay." Madame Li breathed a sigh of relief and immediately ordered the servants, "Hurry, hurry, hurry, clean up the room in Fragrant Garden. I just had people sweep it a few days ago, so it must have accumulated dust these days." Fragrant Garden was the courtyard that Zhao Mei had lived in when she was a young lady in the Fu. After Zhao Mei left, the courtyard had not been abandoned. For more than 10 years, it had been waiting for a person who would never return. Every few days, she would have people clean up the room. It seemed that only relatives could do this. "Mother, why are you in such a hurry?" The second daughter-in-law smiled and said, "Who would have people clean up the room when they are eating? There is no need to rush. After dinner, eldest saw, third saw, and mother can continue chatting. I will have people clean up the room over there. I still have a lot of interesting stories here, but I don't know if our Wan will like them." She was a straightforward person, and her words were full of smiles, which always made people feel refreshed. Jiang Wan smiled and said, "Xiao Xiao has been very busy these past few days. Almost every day, he is not at the Fu. I also intend to stay here for a few more days. I only hope that sisters-in-law will not mind my intrusion." "It's no trouble, no trouble," third daughter-in-law was pleasantly surprised when she heard this. "That's great. Every day, I am trapped in the room and have no one to talk to. It's good that our Wan is here, I finally have company." When second daughter-in-law heard this, she pretended to be angry and said, "What are you saying? Am I not a person every day? I have been accompanying you all these days in vain." Third daughter-in-law hurriedly smiled and begged for mercy. For a moment, the room was filled with cheers and laughter, and it was very lively. When night fell, she accompanied a few of her sisters-in-law and had a good chat. By then, it was already late at night. Jiang Ruan returned to Fragrant Garden and was about to freshen up and rest when she suddenly heard Tian Zhu call out in alarm, "Who is it?" Jiang Ruan turned around and saw a person walk out from the shadows of the lamp. It was Jiang Xing. He glanced at Tian Zhu and said, "You can leave first." Tian Zhu was stunned, but he also knew that Jiang Ruan and this brother of his had always had a close relationship, so he withdrew without a word. Jiang Ruan and Jiang Xing walked to the stone table in the courtyard and sat down. Jiang Ruan smiled and asked, "Eldest brother, you are not sleeping at this late hour. Could it be that you want to chat with me?" Ruan, Jiang Xing's expression became serious. "Did he bully you?" Jiang Ruan was startled for a moment before she regained her senses. The he that Jiang Xing was referring to was naturally Xiao Xiao. She smiled, "Eldest brother, how could he dare to bully me? It has always been me who bullies others. You are worrying too much." Without waiting for her to finish speaking, she was interrupted by Jiang Xing, R1, you and I are siblings born from the same mother. In this world, only the two of us are the closest. Ever since we were young, you have loved to stick to me. Although we have been separated for many years, it is not that I do not understand you. Today, in this fu, you have behaved abnormally. When you were young and angry with me, you did not cry or make a fuss. You always quietly walked away. You are used to using silence to express your dissatisfaction and avoid direct conflict. R1, what problem did you and Xiao Xiao have? Jiang Xing really understood her. Even though many of her thoughts had changed in this life, after a long period of interaction and the connection between siblings born from the same mother, Jiang Xing could still see that something was wrong with her at a glance. However, Jiang Yuan was somewhat helpless. Eldest brother, there is indeed a little problem between me and him. However, if I cannot even deal with such a small problem, then you are underestimating me too much. Eldest brother can't possibly interfere in the matters between husband and wife. He did not bully me, but I saw that he was a little unhappy, so I bullied him. Seeing that Jiang Xing would not give up until he achieved his goal, Jiang Yuan told him the ins and outs of the matter, only hiding the part about the quarrel with Xiao Xiao. She said, in the end, the genie guards are his people. Love me, love my crow. Similarly, I am not happy with him joining the genie guards, so naturally, I am not happy with him. Therefore, I wanted to come out to relax and at the same time let myself calm down and think about the cause of the matter. You think? Jiang Xing looked at her in bewilderment. He lowered his head and pondered for a moment before saying, this matter is indeed a little strange. I will pay attention to it. Since this is the case, you should stay here for a few more days. Since that Xiao Xiao did not stand up for you, you deserve to be angry. He said angrily, I should teach him a lesson. Jiang Yuan smiled. Suddenly, she thought of something and said, eldest brother, there is something I need to tell you. Jiang Xing smiled and said, what is it? He suddenly looked at Jiang Yuan with surprise. Could it be that I am going to have a nephew? What are you talking about? Jiang Yuan did not know whether to laugh or cry. I want to tell you that in this struggle for the throne, between the 13th prince and the 8th prince, even if they can reluctantly maintain a neutral stance, as time goes on, it will definitely be impossible. They will have to declare a side. Eldest brother, I am standing on the 13th prince's side. Oh, Jiang Xing was somewhat disappointed. Jiang Yuan was talking about such an important matter, but he said, if you did not tell me about this matter, in the end, I would still have chosen the 13th prince's side. Why? Jiang Yuan asked doubtfully. Jiang Xing had always been a gentle and upright person. Even though he had become resolute on the battlefield, it had not obliterated the righteousness in his bones. For such a person to support another person and step into the disputes of the court was not an easy matter. Xianli has done things that are disadvantageous to you. Why would you choose him? Jiang Xing snorted. Although that Xian Pei does not appear to be easy to deal with, at least he has helped you out of trouble. Your reasoning is simple. Jiang Yuan could not help but laugh again. After exchanging a few words with Jiang Xing, she felt much more relaxed. After Jiang Xing left, she returned to her room to rest and slept well that night. For the next few days, Jiang Yuan stayed in the General Fu. It was also the first time that the people of the General Fu had seen Jiang Yuan move in. They could not wait to take out all the good things for her to make her happy. Everyone here was full of kindness towards her. This kind of kindness was not the kindness of strangers on the street, but came from the bottom of their hearts, from the kindness of family members. Therefore, Jiang Yuan was actually much happier here than in Jinying Wang Fu. The General Fu only sent someone to Jinying Wang Fu to inform them that Jiang Yuan would be staying here for a few more days. In Jinying Wang Fu, Xiao Xiao was sitting in the study when a manservant came over and reported, Master, there is another letter from the General Fu saying that young madam will be staying there for a few more days. The manservant also wiped away his sweat. These days, housekeeper Lin had tormented these manservants who passed on the message miserably. Ever since that day when Jiang Yuan went to see the Zhao family's third mistress, she had not returned. If the first day could be said to be because it was too late to travel, then the second day could be said to be because the family had gathered together to chat. However, after this series of events, it was somewhat unbearable. The people of the General Fu were naturally open-minded and crude, so they could not see the knack behind it. However, everyone in Jining Wang Fu knew the reason behind it. Jiang Yuan only lacked a few words to clearly tell them, this Wang Fei is angry and wants to return to her maternal home. Jiang Yuan still did not return. Every time the manservant sent out by the Fu to urge her, he would only bring back one piece of news: Wang Fei does not want to leave and wants to stay for a few more days. In fact, it was not good for a married daughter to stay in her maternal home for too long. However, with the status of the General Fu and Jiang Yuan's identity, no one dared to say anything. However, housekeeper Lin was scratching his ears and cheeks in his heart. He could not wait to tie Xiao Xiao up and bring him to the General Fu to offer a humble apology so that he could coax the mistress of the Wang Fu back. Housekeeper Lin probed, "Master, when are you going to personally go to the General's residence to take a look? It's already been more than 10 days, it's not good to continue like this." He forcefully swallowed the words "open up branches and leaves" at the end of his sentence. Xiao Xiao did not speak. He was used to having an expressionless face. Housekeeper Lin, on the other hand, did not know what he meant at the moment. A few days ago, Qi Feng came to look for Jiang Yuan once. Qi Feng did not know that Jiang Yuan had returned to the General Fu. He only brought a large box of novelties with him, saying that it was specially left for Jiang Yuan by a friend. At that time, Xiao Xiao's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. His attitude towards Qi Feng was also surprisingly cold. Housekeeper Lin felt a little guilty and did not know how Qi Feng felt about it. However, Qi Feng left very quickly. The expression between the two of them was very unpleasant. Xiao Xiao's relationship with his martial brothers had always been good. His conduct could be considered righteous. This was the first time that he had a black face with Qi Feng. Housekeeper Lin muttered in his heart, Xiao Xiao's appearance clearly showed that he cared about Jiang Yuan. But why could he not put down his pride? Just as he was thinking, he saw Jin Yi hand over a post. The posts here were generally under housekeeper Lin's control. Jin Yi felt a little strange when he took the post. Housekeeper Lin was shocked. Could it be that Jin Yi wanted to steal his work? He quickly stole a glance. With his superior eyesight, he could tell with just a glance that the invitation was from the Mo residence. There were probably a few other people casually mentioned on it. There was a name that Steward Lin felt was somewhat familiar, but he couldn't recall it no matter how hard he tried. While he was still in a dilemma, he heard Xiao Xiao take a look and say, "Prepare the horse." Was he going to go just like that? Jin Yi quickly brought the cloak. Xiao Xiao left in a hurry and did not stop. Housekeeper Lin stood there in a daze. Suddenly, he slapped his thigh and said, "Hey! Yao family! Isn't that the bandit family that wanted to destroy young master's flower?" The moon was bright and the stars were sparse. The night was as dark as ink. Lian Xiao went outside to prepare hot water for Jiang Yuan to bathe. Tian Zhu stood outside while Jiang Yuan stood in the courtyard. The early spring wind was still somewhat chilly, but it was not as painful as it used to be. The night air was also fresh. The walls of the courtyard were covered with moon radishes. The flowers were small and thin, emitting a faint fragrance. In the night, it was very enchanting. Lu Zhu walked under the moon radish, wanting to pluck a few petals. Suddenly, there was a putong sound on the opposite side of the wall. She jumped in fright. Just as she was about to shout, she saw a big black tabby cat running nimbly from that side. "So it's a cat," Lu Zhu patted her chest. When she turned her head, she heard Jiang Yuan say, "You go in first, I'll sit for a while." Lu Zhu carried the basket back to the house. Jiang Yuan then turned around. The moment Lu Zhu entered the house, there was already an additional slender figure under the moon radish vines. That figure stood under the moon radish vines. His posture was tall and straight, as if he had been standing there since the beginning. Jiang Ruan was not surprised. She just stood a few steps away from him and looked over in silence. The dark clouds gradually dispersed and the moonlight gradually fell. That faintly discernible figure also became clearer. It was a young man, elegant and heroic. Dressed in embroidered clothes, he walked in the night. The moonlight fell on his face, making him look even more handsome than a mortal. It was as if he was a graceful immortal who had walked out of some Cheonglai fairyland, indifferently overlooking the mortal world. Today, Jiang Ruan was wearing a bright red dress with a thin quilt. The hem of the dress was long and slashed down, dragging out a winding scene on the ground. It was also embroidered with large golden flowers. In an instant, it actually dazzled people. Moreover, her appearance was beautiful and alluring. In the dim light of the night, it was even more enchanting. In the air, there seemed to be a stray cat meowing softly. Jiang Ruan's appearance was beautiful and alluring. Her red dress was like fire. She was graceful, yet she gave off a layer of austere aura. She said, "What matter does Wang Ye have to pay a visit in the middle of the night?" The young man's black clothes were like brocade. His appearance was elegant and heroic. He lowered his eyes and said indifferently, "The daughter of Duo when General's Fu is born with a bewitching bone. I specially came to pay a visit. What does being born with a bewitching bone count for? Why don't Wang Ye find a bronze mirror and look inside for yourself? Only then will you know what is called a natural evildoer." Jiang Ruan said coldly. After she finished speaking, she did not wait for the other party to reply. She turned around and returned to the house. With a peng sound, she closed the door. The face of the cold and cheerless young man, who had remained where he was, suddenly showed a trace of a crack. Her guts had grown fat, and she actually slammed the door. It was one of the imperial bodyguards who stretched out his hand. Xiao Xiao looked at him with an unfriendly expression. Jin San's legs turned to jelly as he whispered, "Master, this won't do. Young madam will definitely not forgive you." Sure enough, she was still angry. Xiao Xiao pursed his lips. His gaze towards the door suddenly became somewhat at a loss. Chapter 229. Xiao Xiao stood silently in the night. After the time it took to burn half an incense stick, the door was slammed open and Jiang Ruan's cold voice sounded, "Still not coming in? AI, young madam is indeed an extraordinary woman with a broad mind and courage." Jin San exclaimed in admiration, "Tolerant and magnanimous, it's really hard to find someone like you." She spoke so happily that she had long forgotten who had said, "Young madam will definitely not forgive you." Xiao Xiao, however, was not in the mood to listen to her random flattery. The moment the door opened, he decisively dashed in. When he entered the room, even Lu Zhu was startled and stammered, Wang Ye. "You can leave first," Jiang Ruan said to her. Lu Zhu looked at Jiang Ruan with some hesitation, but still complied and left. After Lu Zhu left, there were only the two of them left in the room. Jiang Ruan sat down in front of the table and calmly waited for Xiao Xiao to speak first. Xiao Xiao was silent for a moment before he sat opposite her. After thinking for a while, he finally asked, "You know? What do you think?" Jiang Ruan asked in return. Xiao Xiao did not know how to respond. After a moment, he said, "I'm sorry, I didn't inform you beforehand." Jiang Ruan glared at him, "If you had informed me beforehand, how could you have put on such an act? I'm afraid it would have been seen through long ago." Xiao Xiao was stunned when he heard this, then he looked at Jiang Ruan with some surprise. "Then you're not angry?" "I'm angry," Jiang Ruan said coldly. Xiao Xiao was startled again. "Why? You're asking me again?" Jiang Ruan was so angry that she laughed. "Xiao Xiao, your subordinates are people, but is my maidservant not people? Since you're putting on an act, then Jean Eyre must also be putting on an act." It's only the two of you, master and servant, that won't be a problem. You must feel sorry for my Lu Zhu. I know that you usually only want to achieve your goal, and you don't need to show any mercy. If you did, then the brocade guard wouldn't need to continue working. But Xiao Xiao, you shouldn't have used these methods on my maidservant. These words were spoken quickly and anxiously. It was obvious that she had hidden them in her heart for a long time. Jiang Ruan's resentment toward Xiao Xiao was also quite deep. After she finished speaking, she waited for Xiao Xiao's reply. Xiao Xiao was slightly startled, and then said, I didn't order it. Jiang Ruan stared blankly, only to hear Xiao Xiao's voice. Jin did not know about this beforehand and only felt suspicious. That day, he did not report to me and only investigated on his own. Later, after the matter was clarified, he told me. Before that, he had already begun acting with Lu Zhu. You're saying that Jin decided to do this on his own? Jiang Ruan frowned. Xiao Xiao replied, he suspects that there is someone behind Liao Meng, and that person might be related to the southern border. If he were to be forcefully exposed, I'm afraid that Lu Zhu would be in danger. Moreover, the people of the southern border are extremely cunning. If Jin had made even the slightest mistake, he might have killed Lu Zhu in order to achieve the same goal of keeping us at odds. Although these words did not directly plead on Jin behalf, they explained Jin motive for doing so. Xiao Xiao looked at Jiang Ruan. How did you find out? Other than Xiao Xiao and Jin the other embroidered uniform guards did not know about this matter. In order to ensure that nothing went wrong, and also in order not to beat the grass and alert the snake so that they could ascertain the mastermind, they had kept their mouths shut. Naturally, Jiang Ruan could not have been told by anyone, so she could only have pushed it out herself. Jiang Ruan rolled her eyes at him and said, I'm not clear about Jin temperament, but he is very particular about having tender and protective feelings for the fairer sex. As long as he treats women who have no ill intentions, he always leaves some leeway. Moreover, he is used to mingling in brothels, so he has seen all kinds of women's tricks. That Liao Meng is also not a stunning beauty. In my opinion, she is not even as beautiful as the top courtesan in the brothels, so how could Jin have a whole new level of respect for her? This, on the contrary, feels strange. The mastermind indeed had sinister intentions. Now that he thought about it, he had first used Liao Meng to cause discord between Jin and Lu Zhu. Moreover, Xiao Xiao and Jiang Ruan both had a protective temperament, and they had a kind of pride in their bones. Naturally, they would not be willing to admit defeat easily. Once such people became stubborn on the same issue, it would only result in a dispute that was difficult to reconcile. Of all the things in the world, the most difficult to control was the human heart. Once there was a flawed seed, the crack would only grow bigger and bigger. If at this time, some external factors were added at the right time, it was inevitable that there would be a split. Therefore, there was Yao Niannian and Qi Feng. Qi Feng originally had some other thoughts about Jiang Ruan, but because of Xiao Xiao and Jiang Ruan's status, he had hidden those feelings deep in his heart. However, this did not mean that Xiao Xiao was completely without a grudge. Deep down, Xiao Xiao was an extremely strong man. If there was another man who coveted his woman, he would always be unhappy. Moreover, witnessing such a scene with his own eyes was so glaring to the eye. For a person who was prideful in his bones, it was undoubtedly a blow. And Yao Niannian's letter and a piece of clothing made people even more fanciful. In this world, there was nothing more powerful than a woman's groundless delusion. Just by relying on the fantasies in one's mind, Yao Niannian's things were enough to destroy a woman's confidence in herself and her husband. These things seemed unremarkable, but they were like tiny beads that were slowly strung together by an entire string. Finally, they formed a complete series of plans. And the ultimate goal of this plan was to cause Jiang Ruan and Xiao Xiao to fall out. However, no matter how perfect a plan was, there would always be flaws. Moreover, Jiang Ruan herself was an expert in perceiving the human heart, and the human heart was the easiest thing to change. Although the other party's plan was good, he had already made a mistake in the first stage. He absolutely did not expect that Jin Air had already become a variable in this game. Jin Air was a man who had experienced many hardships with women. Ever since he had joined the embroidered uniform guard, he often had missions to lurk in brothels. Thus, he had already perfected the art of putting on a show. Liao Meng was undoubtedly a good opponent. Her background and relationship with the Huang family were genuine. Moreover, Liao Meng herself was also an intelligent and beautiful woman. All of this had been planned so flawlessly that it was almost difficult for people to doubt it. However, the first stage of the game's plan had been missed, and also the key to the mistake was that others had overlooked Jin Air's identity. Jin Air's identity was the embroidered uniform guard, and he was the second young master of the Huang family. Perhaps the other party had made a serious and detailed investigation to come to this conclusion, but this understanding was far from enough. Liao Meng was indeed intelligent, but for a man who had stayed in a brothel for so many years, her tricks were not enough. Jin Air almost immediately realized that this woman had ulterior motives. However, the acuity of the embroidered uniform guard allowed him to understand that this matter might not stop there. Liao Meng seemed to have an expert guiding her from behind. She seemed to be just a chess piece, and a person who could even move a chess piece like her had to have a meticulous mind. Since this was the case, it was better to go with the flow and see what the other party wanted to do. As they continued to investigate, Jin Air discovered something unusual and suspected that this matter had something to do with the southern border. Thus, it was not good for him to act blindly without thinking. In order to protect Lu Zhu and also to confirm his suspicions, he followed Liao Meng's plan and put on a show. Then, he quietly found an opportunity to explain this matter to Xiao Xiao. The pitiful Liao Meng really thought that her methods were brilliant, and that she could easily take down someone like Jin Air without much effort. However, she did not know that her every move had long been clearly seen by others. Jiang Wan frowned, but then she thought of another matter and asked, "Then that night, Jin Air and Liao Meng really? This sacrifice is really too great." That night, Jin Air did not return to the Fu, and when he returned, he wanted to cancel the engagement with Lu Zhu. The servants in the Fu had discussed this possibility. Jiang Wan had inadvertently overheard it and felt that it was absurd, but now that she thought about it, she still had to ask about it. At least, she could ask this question on behalf of Lu Zhu. Xiao Xiao did not expect that she would still remember this, and he was stunned for a moment before he shook his head and said, "No, Jin Air has a way to extricate himself." Jiang Wan breathed a sigh of relief in her heart and said, "Since his body is still clean, it's not like there's no chance." Xiao Xiao. However, Jiang Wan did not let him off. She looked at him from the corner of her eye and said with a smile that was not a smile, "His innocence has been preserved, but what about yours?" "Me?" Xiao Xiao was puzzled by her words. However, he heard Jiang Ruan's unhurried words, "These days, haven't you and Yao Ninian put on a good show? Did she take advantage of you in any way, or did she beat you at her own game and lose weight?" Xiao Xiao was startled, and a trace of helplessness flashed through his eyes. These days, in order to observe the movements of the Yao family, even he had indeed done some concealment. However, it was not as blatant as Jiang Wan had said. The Yao family was also very clever. They probably understood that if they directly sent him an invitation, it would be too obvious, and he would definitely not go. Therefore, they only used a roundabout way to save the country, and always relied on the Mo Fu or other colleagues Fu that had relations with Xiao Xiao to approach him. Most of the time, Xiao Xiao just watched coldly from the seat and did not say anything. He said, "No, I am clean and honest." Clean and honest? Jiang Wan played with these 4 words, and suddenly said, "What's the matter with the clothes?" She finally asked the key point. Even though she knew that it was an act, the clothes were still an eyesore in her eyes, and she only wanted to cut them and throw them far away. Xiao Xiao was startled. Thinking that Jiang Wan had always been brooding over this matter, he did not know whether to laugh or cry. The matter of the clothes was an accident. That day, someone at the banquet had accidentally tipped over a wine cup and spilled wine on him. He had always liked cleanliness, so after changing his clothes, he had casually thrown it into the banquet. He had forgotten to throw it away, but he did not expect that it would be taken away by someone. Naturally, that person was Yao Niannian. When Yao Niannian's letter and clothes arrived, Xiao Xiao himself was also confused. He called Emo Tsong to ask about it. It turned out that on that day, Yao Niannian had somehow been splashed with water, and someone had conveniently used the clothes that Xiao Xiao had tossed aside to drape them over her body. After Yao Niannian returned to the Fu, she personally washed Xiao Xiao's robes and sent the letter to the Wang Fu. It had to be said that this move was extremely ingenious. Not saying anything was better than 1,000 words. If it were some of the more powerful wives, they would have already started quarreling with their husbands. This kind of confrontation, where there was no trust between husband and wife, would naturally not bring any benefits. It was feared that the relationship between husband and wife would only worsen. Now that he thought about it, the person who had splashed wine on Xiao Xiao at the banquet had also done it on purpose. They had long known about Xiao Xiao's habit of liking cleanliness. Even if Xiao Xiao himself did not forget to change his clothes, he would still have a way to get his hands on them. Xiao Xiao then explained the ins and outs of the matter to Jiang Yuan. When Jiang Yuan heard this, although she still had a dissatisfied expression on her face, her gaze softened. It had to be said that Xiao Xiao's explanation was quite in line with her intentions. At least, the words clean and honest were indeed worthy. However, this was also related to Xiao Xiao's own temperament. Everyone knew that Xiao Xiao was used to being cold and indifferent. Naturally, he would not do anything out of line at the banquet. If he had really spoken gently to Yao Niannian, that would have been very suspicious. Jiang Yuan had only just understood when Xiao Xiao began to ask, "You knew about Jean Eyre's matter. When did you know that I was acting?" "I knew from the beginning." Jiang Yuan snorted, "You are a person who is protective of your own, but Jean Eyre and I, you probably also want to protect me. In any case, Jean Eyre is a man. If you did not have any other intentions towards him, why would you protect him and offend me? It's just that the matter was too abnormal from the beginning. I'm not a fool." Xiao Xiao. Jiang Yuan's words were completely gilding her own face. However, when she thought about it carefully, she could hear the unusual meaning behind it. Xiao Xiao was indeed a person who was protective of his own. If it had been someone else but Jiang Yuan, he would definitely have stood on Jean Eyre's side. This was a kind of equal trust that a leader had towards his subordinates. Moreover, this subordinate also had brotherly feelings. However, with Jiang Yuan, Xiao Xiao was not the same. Perhaps this meant that he valued a lover over a friend, but how could it not be? The person who had set up this trap undoubtedly understood Xiao Xiao very well. This trap had fully considered Xiao Xiao's character and characteristics, and calculated his reaction to every matter. However, there was only one thing that they had overlooked, or perhaps they were unwilling to admit, and that was that times had changed. Now, the first person that Xiao Xiao wanted to protect was naturally Jiang Yuan. Therefore, when Xiao Xiao had misunderstood Jiang Yuan and become distant, Lu Zhu was suspicious, Lian Xiao was suspicious, and even Tian Zhu was somewhat suspicious. However, the person who had seen it the clearest was Jiang Yuan herself. She clearly understood Xiao Xiao's feelings towards her, so she gave him the same kind of trust. "From the beginning, you have been acting with me?" Xiao Xiao was flabbergasted. Immediately after, he said somewhat awkwardly, "Qi Feng." "It was also on purpose." Jiang Yuan calmly said, "Although this matter is very unfair to him, if we are to put on an act, we have to do it properly. If I act like this, they will only feel that their plan is progressing so smoothly. Complacent, they will inevitably give themselves away. As the saying goes, complacent will give themselves away. I am speeding up the exposure of their flaws." Xiao Xiao was slightly startled and did not speak for a long time. Seeing him like this, Jiang Yuan frowned and said, "Why aren't you speaking? Do you think that my actions are somewhat inappropriate?" Speaking of this, Jiang Yuan also sighed in her heart. She had unscrupulously used every person and thing around her that she could use. This had become a long-standing habit in this lifetime, and it could not be changed in a short period of time. She understood the feelings that Chi Feng had for her. It was not that she did not feel guilty for using such feelings, but no matter how deep the guilt was, it could not compare to her determination to protect her own people. I just feel, Xiao Xiao shook his head, looked at her and said, there is also a tacit understanding between you and me. Jiang Ruan did not expect him to say this. She was slightly startled and met Xiao Xiao's serious gaze. She did not know why, but her face turned red and she looked away somewhat uncomfortably. Although they were already husband and wife, sometimes the words that Xiao Xiao said could always make people blush and their hearts beat faster. When a serious person said sweet words, it always made people particularly happy. She had to admit that at this moment, Jiang Ruan's mood was like the moon radish flowers blooming in the dark night outside, slowly filled with a sweet fragrance. But what did Xiao Xiao say just now? Tacit understanding? Jiang Ruan lowered her eyes and her gaze fell on the youth in black opposite her. Indeed, the arrangement of this elimination was indeed ingenious. Even if Jiang Ruan saw it herself, she had to admit that the other party had put in a lot of effort. It seemed to be an extremely inconspicuous matter, and there was nothing special about it, but the turning point was inevitable, causing people to be led by the nose and walk into the trap. Jiang Ruan was also an expert in guessing people's minds. This elimination took advantage of the weakness of human nature and the distrust in their interactions to expand infinitely. However, this ingenious plan was seen through from the beginning, and now it was just a joke. Why was this so? Naturally, it was because of the tacit understanding between them. Jiang Ruan and Xiao Xiao actually did not inform each other in advance. Both sides did not know each other's plans, but by relying on absolute trust and tacit understanding, they completed a flawless performance. Because there was no prior discussion, one could not see any flaws, and only felt that it was incomparably real. This was tacit understanding. While she was contemplating, Xiao Xiao suddenly walked in front of her. Jiang Ruan was startled, but Xiao Xiao reached out and pressed her shoulder. He moved closer to her ear and whispered, "Since you are not angry, then follow me back to the Fu." "What Fu?" Jiang Ruan said snappily, "Grandfather and the others are all asleep, there is no need to disturb them." "Then go back quietly." Xiao Xiao was unforgiving, "I will carry you and climb over the wall." The dignified Jinying Wang was so fond of climbing over the wall, liked to carry out night raids before marriage, and still liked to do so after marriage. If word got out, people would really laugh their heads off. Jiang Ruan said, "Are you not afraid that grandfather and the others will see that I am not here tomorrow morning and report to the authorities?" Xiao Xiao pursed his lips. He could not bring his own wife home. What kind of logic was this? Even if there was such a logic, it would still have to be changed. However, Xiao Xiao could do nothing about this logic, but he could not do anything about Jiang Ruan. He knew that Jiang Ruan had always been a person of her word, so naturally, there was no room for negotiation. Immediately, he said, "That's good, then I will not leave tonight." Jiang Ruan looked at him in surprise, "What are you doing?" "Oh, I miss you." Xiao Xiao said lightly, but he buried his face in Jiang Ruan's neck. Jiang Ruan felt a little ticklish and uncomfortable, so she lifted his head. Unfortunately, Xiao Xiao did not move an inch. Jiang Ruan was both angry and amused, so she simply ignored him. She had never felt that Xiao Xiao was so clingy. Was it really true that absence makes the heart grow fonder? Thinking of these words, Jiang Ruan's face suddenly turned red again, and she hurriedly interrupted her wandering thoughts. "Are you here to cause trouble for me? Quickly go back and leave before anyone notices. I also want to take a bath, don't laze around without moving." When Xiao Xiao heard this, he immediately let go of Jiang Ruan. Jiang Ruan thought that he had understood her words and wanted to leave, but she did not hear any movement for a long time. Somewhat puzzled, she looked back at him and almost fainted from anger. She saw that Xiao Xiao was unbuckling his belt, and when he saw her look over, the corners of his mouth twitched. "Just right, let's go together." Chapter 230. Early the next morning, Jiang Ruan woke up a little late. The servants in the General Fu had received instructions from Madame Li to not disturb her from her sweet dreams. Therefore, by the time Jiang Ruan woke up, the sky was already bright and Xiao Xiao was no longer by her side. The room was so clean that it was as if nothing had happened last night. She slowly propped herself up, only to feel that her whole body was extremely sore and painful, and a few faint red marks could be seen on her shoulders. Jiang Ruan was speechless as she looked at him for a while. Xiao Xiao had not seen her for more than 10 days, but he had become more and more of a beast, and his actions were also very domineering. It really was the so-called absence makes the heart grow fonder. Dewdrop carefully observed her expression. Although she was somewhat reproachful, there was no anger on her face. It seemed that Xiao Xiao's arrival last night had changed her. At least the coldness on her face had disappeared a little. It was probably because the husband and wife had reconciled and the estrangement had been eliminated. This was naturally a good thing. Lu Zhu was also sincerely happy for Jiang Ruan. Unconsciously, she met Jiang Ruan's thoughtful gaze as she stared at her. Dewdrop was startled and asked hesitantly, "Young madam, what do you want this servant to do?" Xiao Xiao stared fixedly at her for a long time, then sighed slightly and said somewhat helplessly, "That's right, the people of the southern border are naturally cunning. Once you are involved, it will be hard to avoid danger." Inside the carriage, Lu Zhu and Lian Qiao were somewhat puzzled. Since when did Jiang Ruan intend to embroider the 1,000-armed guanyin? Yao Nianyan had not expected that Jiang Ruan would ignore her words just now and suddenly ask for such a request. Governor-General Yao was the Governor-General of Binhai, and he would spend most of the year in the Southern Sea. When Yao Nianyan was a child, she had also lived in the Southern Sea. It was only when she gradually grew up that she was sent back to the capital. Such a small matter was naturally not difficult for her. Yao Nianyan smiled and said, "There's no need to thank me. Since I have a friendship with His Highness, I am naturally a friend of the princess. I will always want to help my friends. I'll talk to my father when I get home." Just as Jiang Ruan had said, at this moment, in the Yao Fu, the housekeeper by Governor Yao's side looked at Yao Nianyan with some astonishment and said, "Miss said that she wants Jia Lin's moonlight stone?" Jialin. The South Sea had never heard of Jialin, and what was a moonstone? Is it very famous? He doesn't know any martial arts. Is there anything special about him? Jiang Ruan asked. Naturally, I'm not afraid of any danger. Jiang Ruan glared at him. Suddenly, a trace of craftiness flashed across her eyes as she said, "I more or less know what your plan is, so I helped you start it in advance. Does she know any martial arts?" Jiang Ruan's expression was extremely grave. Tianzhu was also slightly surprised, but after carefully recalling, she shook her head and said, "No, but the servant girl beside her has some martial arts, but not much. It should be for self-protection." This wasn't hard to explain. With Yao Nianyan's status, she would always bring a few guards with her when she went out. Yao Nianyan probably didn't want to bring any guards, so he brought a maid who knew some martial arts. When they returned to the Wang Fu, Steward Lin saw that Jiang Ruan had returned, and once again, he gave a lively celebration. Then, he exclaimed in admiration at the generosity of the General Fu. Indeed, it was young madam's maiden family. Jiang Ruan was not in the mood to talk to him. She only instructed Steward Lin to tidy up the pile of gifts before she returned to her courtyard. When he arrived at the courtyard, he only asked Tianzhu to go to the study. Jiang Ruan sat in the carriage as it stopped. Tianzhu was the first to jump down. She looked at the people outside and asked, "Who is it?" Unexpectedly, Jiang Ruan did not answer Yao Nianyan's question. Her face was still smiling, but she asked, "Speaking of which, there is still a matter that I need Miss Yao's help with." Jiang Ruan shook her head and said, "It's nothing." Last night's incident with Xiao Xiao had confirmed her conjecture. Jean Eyre was really just putting on a show. However, Xiao Xiao, she, and Jean Eyre also knew about this show. However, Lu Zhu was the one who didn't know. What kind of feelings did Lu Zhu have for Jin Er? Other people's lives and feelings could not be decided by her. Thus, how this matter was resolved would depend on Jin Er and Lu Zhu themselves. Jiang Ruan sighed softly and said to Tian Zhu, "Pack up your things. Today, we will return to the Fu." Lian Xiao didn't say anything more. The carriage moved slowly, but it moved very steadily. When they reached the streets of the city, they heard a clear and melodious female voice coming from outside the carriage. "May I ask if this is Hong and Juanzhu's carriage? Return to the Fu?" Tian Zhu was somewhat startled. Although she knew that the two of them must have reconciled last night, why would they suddenly return to the Fu? Jiang Wan only said, "It's nothing, it's better to catch them off guard." She then got up and went out the door. "I will go explain to grandfather and grandmother." "What?" Tian Zhu was shocked and whispered, "If she isn't Yao Niannian, who is she?" Yao Niannian smiled and said, "No need to thank me. But looking at Juanzhu's appearance, did you just come back from the General Fu?" "I met Yao Niannian today," Jiang Ruan said. The person outside was just a young lady dressed like a servant girl. From the cloth that the girl was wearing, it could be seen that her family background was not ordinary. However, that servant girl did not expect that a woman with an icy expression would suddenly jump out from inside and impolitely ask who she was. She was startled. She composed herself and was about to speak when a gentle voice came from beside her, "It's me." My servant girl was rude and offended Junzhu. I hope that Junzhu will be magnanimous enough to forgive me. Just now, I saw the General Fu's carriage and guessed that Junzhu was also in it, so I rashly went up to greet you. Jiang Ruan called Lian Xiao and Lu Zhu in to freshen up. When Lian Xiao was combing Jiang Ruan's hair, she looked a little embarrassed. Jiang Ruan saw her appearance and asked, "What's wrong?" "This." Tian Zhu was somewhat puzzled. "What is young Furan asking?" "Nothing, I will return to my room first," Yao Niannian suddenly said in a low voice. For the first time, there was no smile on her face, only coldness. When she returned to her room, Yao Niannian sat in front of the dressing mirror. She stared at the woman in the bronze mirror and muttered to herself, "A trap." She actually saw through it. She sighed, and with a light flash in her sleeve, something floated out of the window, leaving behind a burst of orchid fragrance. When Madame Li heard that Jiang Ruan suddenly wanted to leave, she was naturally shocked. For the past 10 days, the Zhao family had been very happy because of Jiang Ruan's arrival. Although Jiang Ruan's character was not very warm, she was very good at making good relations with people. In her previous life, she had also learned a lot from Xian Li in the palace. Now, with the Zhao family, who had always been kind to her, she had it at her fingertips. Therefore, the Zhao family had long regarded her as a member of the family. To leave so suddenly, there was no need to say anything about other people, but Madame Li was naturally reluctant. However, Jiang Ruan only said that Xiao Xiao had come to urge her, so Madame Li naturally could not stop her. The young couple was doing well, how could they stay at their maiden home every day? There was no need to alienate the affection between husband and wife. Therefore, Mrs. Li smiled and said, "That being the case, it's not good for me to say anything. I will ask the housekeeper to bring the gift back and also bring some for that child Xiao Xiao. Erwan, you should come to the general's mansion in the future. This is your home, grandmother wants you to come." Yao Niannian stood motionless, his gaze following the direction of the carriage's departure. A trace of darkness flashed in his eyes. What did the phrase, "There are still many matters to be dealt with in the Fu," represent? Was it the supreme authority of the master in Jinying Wang Fu? Or was it a demonstration? Yao Niannian slowly lowered his head. On his face, there seemed to be no difference from the smile he had just had. Maintaining his indifferent appearance, he said, "Let's go. There is no need for me to expose her. She can no longer use this identity. And in such a short period of time, it is not so easy to find the identity of a family member of a high-ranking official who can be close to the center of the court." Jiang Ruan glared at him, but did not dwell on this issue. She had not been in the Fu these past few days, so even if Xiao Xiao wanted to tell her, he could not. Thus, she said, previously, I felt that it was a little strange. It was probably intuition. I always felt that she was very different from the first time I met her, so when I saw her on the street today, I deliberately tested her. Jiang Yuan recounted the matter of asking Yao Ninian to help her find the moonlight stone on the street, and then said that Jialin was just a place that I randomly made up. There was no such thing as a moonlight stone, but she actually agreed. Obviously, she was very unfamiliar with the South Sea region. Yao Ninian had followed Governor General Yao to work in Binhai since he was a child. How could he not be clear about such a small matter? There must be something wrong with her. Jiang Ruan's gaze sank, and she slowly said, "Let me guess, she is from the southern frontier." Jiang Ruan was stunned for a moment when she saw his worried expression, and then she immediately pulled him into the room and closed the door. Xiao Xiao quietly let her do all this. When Jiang Ruan pulled him to the study table to sit down, he unhurriedly poured a cup of tea for Jiang Ruan. "Speak slowly. It just so happens that maternal grandmother's birthday is approaching, and I intend to embroider a figurine with 1,000 hands for rent. However, that figurine must be made with beads. I heard that the Jialin area of the South Sea is rich in moonlight stones, which are used to polish the beads. However, recently, there have been no such beads in the shops in the capital. I know that Yao Darin is the governor of Binhai, so the next time you go to the South Sea, can you bring some for me? I will be very grateful." Jiang Yuan smiled slightly and interrupted what he was about to say. "No need to say more, I have already decided. If the southern frontier colludes with Xianli, sooner or later, Xianpei will also be affected. I can't let this happen." Xiao Xiao was slightly startled, as if he was trying to figure out the meaning of Jiang Ruan's words, and then said, You want to expose her?" Xiao Xiao asked. Tianzhu shook her head. "I didn't discover anything." "Why does young madam ask this? Miss Yao is just an ordinary young lady, how could she know martial arts?" There had always been a lot of intelligence in the embroidered uniform guard, and Yao Ninian was also one of the top young ladies in the capital. Everything about her was naturally known by everyone. With such a Yao Ninian, why would Jiang Yuan suddenly ask if she knew martial arts? Tianzhu was puzzled, but she saw Jiang Yuan slowly lower her head and say, "She is not Yao Ninian." It was like punching cotton, and no amount of strength could be exerted. Any words that could anger others, when it came to Jiang Yuan, did not seem to care at all. Watching the carriage go far away, the servant girl beside Yao Ninian indignantly said, "Miss, she must have done it on purpose." In her heart, she must have been very angry, but on the surface, she pretended to be calm and indifferent. "It must be so. Miss, it would be better if you changed your clothes." Lian Xiao's face was red as she looked at the back of Jiang Ruan's neck. Seeing that Jiang Ruan was still somewhat at a loss, she lowered her head and fetched a bronze mirror to look at Jiang Ruan's back. She saw a dark red mark on her fair neck, which appeared extremely ambiguous. Jiang Ruan was stunned, and immediately, she rained down a torrent of curses on Xiao Xiao in her heart. Only then did she let Lu Zhu fetch a piece of clothing with a vertical collar that could cover up the red mark on the neck. There were 2 carriages in total, one for Jiang Yuan, and the other for the ceremonial carriage. To follow the ceremonial carriage, Jiang Ruan's carriage also moved slowly. Originally, the General Fu and Jinying Wang Fu were not too far apart, so the distance was several times longer than the original. Lian Xiao suggested, "Why don't young madam go first, and the carriage behind will slowly catch up. In broad daylight, no one will be able to snatch the carriage away." Lu Zhu frowned as she listened. This Yao Ninian kept talking about clinging to Xiao Xiao. What was going on? These words deliberately caused Jiang Yuan to misunderstand. Lu Zhu could not help but feel a little nervous. She thought that Jiang Yuan and Xiao Xiao had finally buried the hatchet with great difficulty last night, and today, this Yao Ninian had come to make trouble again. Lian Xiao held on to Lu Zhu, lest she lose her rationality and rush out. After all, she needed to be more calm. but even so, she did not dare to agree with Yao Nianyan's words. Yao Nianyan hung his head, as if he had thought of something, and said in a low voice, "No wonder those days, he." Halfway through his words, Yao Nianyan suddenly raised his head to look at Jiang Yuan, as if he had suddenly realized that there was something wrong with his words, and hurriedly shut his mouth. Halfway through his words, it made people's hearts itch. However, this obviously fell through for Jiang Yuan. She still did not seem to see Yao Nianyan's expression, and only smiled. "If there is nothing else, I will leave first. There are still many things to do in the Fu, and when I return, I will have to deal with them. If Miss Yao wishes to continue strolling, I hope that you can enjoy yourself to the fullest." Tianzhu followed Jiang Yuan into the study, and Jiang Yuan walked to the table and sat down. Tianzhu hesitated for a moment before asking, "What happened to young Furen? For her to go in alone, there must be something important." In the end, Jiang Yuan just looked at her and said, "Just now, that Yao Nianyan, what do you think?" She always brought the matter to Xiao Xiao, but Jiang Yuan was not the slightest bit angry. Instead, as if she did not hear the hidden meaning in Tianzhu's words, she smiled and said, "Thank you very much, Miss Yao." Tianzhu was also very efficient, and in less than 2 hours, Xiao Xiao returned to the Fu. He must have rushed back from outside, and he did not even have time to change his clothes. When he saw Jiang Yuan, he asked, "What happened?" Jiang Yuan shook her head and said, "It's nothing, you can slowly return." These past few days in the General Fu, she did not observe the surroundings like she did in the Wang Fu. Instead, she sent letters to Xian Pei, so the news had lagged quite a bit. Unlike Xiao Xiao, who used the embroidered uniform guards to gather information, Jiang Yuan used her own eyes to deduce the possible abnormalities based on the bits and pieces of her daily life. Jiang Yuan laughed again, but when she saw the horse carriage that the General Fu had prepared, she was stunned. That horse carriage seemed to be pulling an entire carriage full of gifts. Indeed, Li Shi had given her almost everything that she could think of. She did not dare to refuse the gifts of an elder, but she could not return them all. Jiang Yuan did not know whether to laugh or cry. So many gifts, how was this the usual return gift for a visit? It was more like a move. Tianzhu was somewhat hesitant. "Young Furen, I'm afraid the carriage will move very slowly." "Exactly." Jiang Yuan also answered. The teacup in Yao Nianyan's hand fell, and her expression suddenly stiffened for a moment. The servant girl beside her jumped in fright, and hurriedly squatted down to pick up the broken pieces of the teacup. The housekeeper saw that Yao Nianyan's expression was not right, and asked anxiously, "What's wrong with Miss? Why don't this old servant send someone to ask again? Perhaps it's just that this old servant's talent is shallow, and I don't know the reputation of the Moonlight Stone." Yao Nianyan's expression changed slightly, and she immediately smiled. "If I can help Junju, I will naturally do my best." The servant girl on the ground, however, knew the cause of the matter, and angrily said, "Taking an item that is simply impossible for Miss to find, that Jining Wangfei is really black-hearted. If Miss can't find it, won't she have something to criticize?" She did not notice that something was wrong. "The matter is somewhat thorny," Jiang Yuan suddenly said. "Think of a way to find Xiao Xiao, and let him return to the Fu earlier. There is something important to discuss." These words were spoken very amiably, without any airs, as if she was talking to an old acquaintance. After a moment, the curtain of the carriage was lifted, and Jiang Yuan walked out. Tianzhu stood beside Jiang Yuan, and together, they looked at the woman in front of them. This woman was none other than the Yao family's young miss, Yao Nianyan. Jiang Yuan also smiled. "What a coincidence, I did not expect to meet young Miss Yao here. It can be seen that we are really fated." Yao Nianyan also nodded and smiled. "Yes." Nianyan suddenly came forward to disturb, and did not want to be too rash and impolite. It was really thoughtless. "It's just that we have met a few times, and thought that we should at least greet each other." "And?" Xiao Xiao raised his eyebrows, only to hear Jiang Yuan speak again. "I suspect that she is not Yao Nianyan." Seeing that Xiao Xiao did not respond, Jiang Yuan was a little puzzled, but immediately understood, and angrily said, you already knew? In the carriage, Lu Zhu and Lian Xiao indeed did not dare to make a sound, because Jiang Ruan's expression was very solemn since she had boarded the carriage. This was somewhat rare for her, who usually faced everything with a smile. Lu Zhu and Lian Xiao did not know the reason, and only thought that Jiang Ruan had been angered by Yao Nianyan again. In their hearts, they could not wait to immediately drive Yao Nianyan out of the capital. How could there be an unmarried woman who stared at someone else's husband all day long? The Yao family's status would never allow Yao Nianyan to come to the genie Wang Fu as a concubine, but Yao Nianyan's current attitude was clear as day. She basically had the goal of entering the household. Could it be that she still wanted to be on equal footing with Jiang Ruan? Lian Xiao and Lu Zhu were still thinking, only to see that Jiang Ruan's expression had become even more solemn, and they did not even dare to ask. Don't be angry. Seeing that she was about to get angry again, Xiao Xiao hurriedly strangled Jiang Ruan's anger in the bud, and comforted her. Previously I had my suspicions, but now it is almost confirmed. How do you know? He changed the topic. Chapter 231. Jiang Ruan, follow them on the road. If they cannot commit suicide, think of a way to kill them. This woman's voice was pleasant to the ear, as ethereal as her eyes, but the words she spoke made one shudder. This group of people were all men of sacrifice. In such a house-to-house investigation, it was inevitable that some of them would be caught. It was fine if they could commit suicide, but if they couldn't commit suicide after having their weapons and poison removed, they would naturally have to think of a way to deal with them. Xiao Xiao looked at her and asked doubtfully, "Did I say something wrong?" She was the one who had released the news that the people of Nanjiang had forced Yao Nianyan to commit suicide. The genie guards were able to gather information, so naturally, they could also create information. Finding some people to intentionally guide these rumors and slanders would naturally achieve a lot of results. However, Jin San was somewhat astonished. Then why did Governor General Yao believe it so easily? He did not even use the backup plan that we had prepared. Could it be that Miss Yao's death really made him muddle-headed? Achieving his goals so smoothly really made Jin San somewhat depressed. Jiang Ruan stared blankly for a while before she understood the meaning behind Xiao Xiao's words. She said, "You did all this for pay." Jiang Ruan was speechless for a moment. Thinking that Jin San was still here, if she were to follow Xiao Xiao's words, it was possible that something awkward would happen again. Thus, she changed the topic and said, "All right, now that Xianli has already lost the Yao family, as for his allies in the southern frontier, they should be fleeing in panic from the capital city. They should also experience the feeling of being detested by everyone. This time, Governor General Yao has received the imperial edict, and the capital magistrate does not dare to underestimate it. The entire city is heavily guarded, and the people of Nanjiang must not be feeling good right now." Jiang Ruan smiled slightly. Just thinking about it makes one happy. His honeyed words were getting more and more smooth. Jiang Ruan glared at him and said, "Although we cannot let him be caught, it is not as if the people of Nanjiang came unprepared, so this matter cannot be over so easily. However, in this world, there is no such thing as turning around and leaving after scheming against someone. In any case, that Miss Yao was a rival in love, and I quite like her. At the very least, I must avenge her. This time, I must at least cause some trouble for the people of Nanjiang. Since Miss Yao was killed so miserably by them, why don't we also make them miserable?" Just as Jiang Ruan had said, these days, the capital city had practically conducted a house-to-house investigation. As long as there was even the slightest bit of suspicion, they would not let it go. In this way, the people of the southern Jiang who were scattered and hidden in the capital city felt an unprecedented pressure. All along, they had been in the dark while others were in the light. This time, when it was their turn to be in the light while others were in the dark, for the first time, they actually felt helpless. The more he thought about it, the more resentment he felt. Wasn't the Yao clan a little too arrogant? They were so brazen in blocking his path, yet they had forgotten that they were the spies from another country. Between a woman who chose to hang herself for unknown reasons and a woman who was forced to hang herself for the sake of her country and family, it was obvious that the latter was more valuable. Jin-san was taken aback and said, "I see. I didn't expect Governor General Yao to love his daughter so dearly, but in the end, he still wants to make use of her. It looks like his feelings aren't all that sincere after all. Do you think I don't want to?" The woman said coldly, "Acting rashly will only expose both you and me." In a courtyard not far from the capital city, Yuan Chuan stood with his hands clasped behind his back. Looking at the signal sent by his subordinate, he sighed and shook his head. "We've been exposed." Although no problem could be found, the entire Yao Fu was in mourning. Governor General Yao had only gotten such a daughter when he was middle-aged. She had always been a precious daughter whom he had cherished dearly, yet now, she had passed away. One could well imagine the blow he had suffered. He didn't even want to participate in the fight for the throne in the imperial court anymore. He only felt disheartened and grieved for his daughter wholeheartedly. Yao Nianyan had always been gentle and proper, and he was also generous in his conduct. For him to hang himself like that, something must have happened. However, no matter how they investigated, they could not find anything. When they asked the servants in the Fu, Yao Nianyan's personal servant girls said that Yao Nianyan had been acting rather strangely recently. He was different from how he was in the past, and occasionally seemed to have something on his mind. When everyone heard this, they were even more certain that Yao Nianyan had hanged himself for some reason. For a moment, the entire Yao Fu was in so much pain that they wished they were dead. However, Yuan Chuan and the others didn't expect that Xianli was also too busy to take care of himself at this moment. In the 8th Prince's Fu, Xianli looked at the letter in his hand. The corners of his mouth stiffened, and then his complexion became extremely ashen. His voice was neither light nor heavy, but it contained a deep anger as he said, "Why would the Yao family seek refuge with Xian Pei? What's going on?" "Insignificant skill," Xiao Xiao said disdainfully. "Xia Qing is much more brilliant than him." Xia Qing was a Jinling divine physician, so she naturally had a way to detoxify the poison. However, the Yao family has already buried Yao Nianyan's body, so we can't see the poison. "Xia Qing can't detoxify it," Xiao Xiao said. The Yao family's precious daughter had died, so it was only natural that she should be buried early. At this time, if Xia Qing were to jump about, who knew what other people would think? However, medical skills were particular about looking, listening, questioning, and feeling the pulse. Even the coroner had to first look at the corpse. Without seeing Yao Nianyan's corpse, Xia Qing was afraid that she wouldn't be able to resolve the Nanjiang people's methods. She had only asked people to spread the cause of Yao Nianyan's death, and had not exposed the relationship between Xianli and the Nanjiang people. However, now the Yao family had already expressed their support for Xian Pei. When Xian Pei wrote the letter, his tone also seemed somewhat surprised. Jiang Yuan thought about it and could only think that it was Xiao Xiao who had done it. Only he could do such a thing that could kill two birds with one stone. The Yao family's young miss, Yao Nianyan, had hanged herself at the door of her own Fu. Indeed, he wasn't wrong, because it was a fact that the Nanjiang people and Xianli had colluded together. Xiao Xiao had only spoken the truth, and it couldn't even be considered as fanning the flames. However, why was it so strange to say it at this critical juncture? Why did it feel so shameless? Jiang Ruan was silent. At first, she didn't think so, but now that she understood Xiao Xiao better, she could see that other than when he was ruthless and decisive like the wind when he destroyed his opponents, he sometimes made decisions that didn't let go of any opportunity. Before he destroyed his opponents, they must have spat out their last drop of oil. Yao Nianyan's death set off a great uproar in the capital city. No one knew what had happened to the originally noble and intelligent young lady of a noble family, but she just had to hang herself at the door of her own home. This was a matter that caused people to be suspicious, and everyone suspected that there was some hidden story behind it. As the common people discussed, many possibilities popped up. However, this matter was still not over. On the second day after Yao Nianyan's coffin, a shocking news broke out in the capital city. Young Miss Yao had hanged herself, but she had been forced to do so. The people who had forced young Miss Yao to die were precisely the Nanjiang people. The Nanjiang people had infiltrated the capital city. Do you really think that he lost his mind because of Yao Ninian's death? Jiang Ruan asked. Tianzhu didn't understand and looked doubtfully at Jiang Ruan. Xiao Xiao silently drank his tea and didn't intend to interrupt. Jiang Ruan shook her head and said, Governor General Yao is naturally sad, but he is an intelligent person. It was unknown where Governor General Yao had gotten the news that the people of Nanjiang also wanted to meddle in the fight for the throne. Undoubtedly, the emperor in their hearts was Xian Li. Perhaps the people of Nanjiang entering the capital was part of Xian Li's plan. A servant circled around to the corpse to take a look. This look was not important, but immediately, another blood-curdling scream overflowed. This time, it was even more mournful than before. Everyone who heard it felt their hearts tighten as they did not know what had happened. The servant pointed at the slightly swaying silhouette above him. His mouth was wide open as he stammered, Young Miss, this time, it was Yuan Chuan who underestimated the enemy. Yuan Chuan said, I did not expect Jiang Ruan to be so ruthless. She even made use of this point. Moreover, he did not expect that her methods would be so brutal. She had directly shouted and beaten them like mice during a festival. It was not known where this shocking news had started, but the more it spread, the fiercer it became. The more it spread, the fiercer it became, and the more it spread, the fiercer it became. However, this shocking news was different from the previous ones, which were full of loopholes and had no head or tail. It actually described in detail the process of Yao Ninian being threatened. It turned out that the people of Nanjiang had grasped the Yao family's weakness and wanted Yao Ninian to think of a way to change the entire Yao family's political stance. They wanted to cooperate with the people of Nanjiang and become the Nanjiang spy in the Great Jin dynasty. However, young Miss Yao had a loyal and fierce temperament. She was also afraid that the people of Nanjiang would burn her Yao Fu to the fire. Thus, she clenched her teeth and hung herself, wanting to protect the Yao Fu. When this news reached them, Jiang Ruan was accompanying Xiao Xiao in the study. Xiao Xiao was reading the intelligence report sent by the brocade guards. Jiang Ruan was curled up in Xiao Xiao's embrace. She was actually considered tall, but in Xiao Xiao's embrace, she appeared very petite. This way, on one hand, it was very warm. On the other hand, it was convenient for her to read the information recorded in the intelligence report with Xiao Xiao. Xiao Xiao did not obstruct her and allowed her to read. As Jiang Ruan read, she suddenly said, Yao Ninian is dead. Oh, perhaps the customs are different, Xiao Xiao said in a deadpan manner, the people of Nanjiang are open-minded. Seeing Jiang Ruan glaring at him, Xiao Xiao changed his words, the Yao Fu is heavily guarded, for fear of alerting the enemy. Madam is so intelligent, she must have a way to deal with this. Xiao Xiao said helplessly, I can only succeed and withdraw. Finding Xian Li to extricate himself from this predicament seemed to be the best method at present. There should also be Xian Li's people in the capital magistrate. With so many people, it was impossible to rescue them one by one. At the very least, it could help them get out of their current predicament. Running around like headless flies was really too shameful. That's not it. Jiang Ruan smiled faintly, for Yao Ninian, a good reputation after her death is the last thing that Governor Yao can fight for her. Therefore, Governor Yao's way of doing things is not wrong, and he is also thinking of Yao Ninian. It's just that he is calmer. When Jiang Ruan finished speaking, she looked at Xiao Xiao, who was standing at the side like a wooden stake. However, the relationship between Nanjiang and Xian Li was leaked by you, right? What you say makes sense. Jiang Ruan thought about it and agreed with Xiao Xiao's words. It must be known that the Yao Fu was, after all, the mansion of a first-ranked official. Governor Yao was also a martial artist, and there were many experts in the Fu. It seemed that Yao Ninian had died long ago, and he had died outside the Fu. The other party was afraid of entering the Fu and causing trouble, so they chose the safer method of leaving Yao Ninian at the door. Although it was a little rough, it was relatively safe. This is not the way to go on, Yuan Chuan said. Every day, there would be new casualties. These people were very precious resources to them. They were spies hidden in the capital city to gather information. Normally, they would be hidden in the crowd and would not be able to see anything different. However, once they were investigated, there was no way to prove their identity. Very quickly, they would be caught. This time, the capital magistrate was determined. It was impossible for any fish to escape the net. If this continued, most of the spies would be caught. When most of the spies were caught, they would be like blind and deaf people in the capital city of the Great Jin dynasty. They would forever be in a passive position. However, to be able to make the coroner unable to find any problems, the people of Nanjiang do have some methods. Jiang Yuan muttered, at that time, when you fought with them, they wouldn't have used any evil methods, right? She still remembered Jiang Su's charm techniques. The people of Nanjiang seemed to be proficient in these kinds of witchcraft. I don't blame you. The woman was silent for a while, then said, think of a way to tell Xianli. Xiao saw that she was silent and said, the Yao family now has a blood feud with Xianli. Sooner or later, Xianpei and Xianli will have a battle. The Yao family is very important in His Majesty's heart. If we win over the Yao family, not only will it be beneficial for us, but it will also help His Majesty's attitude. Xiao. This matter almost swept the entire capital city on the same day. After all, in the capital city, there was no one who did not know of the Yao family, and the Yao family's young miss was an outstanding young lady with good aptitude. The real Yao Niannian had naturally died long ago, and the current Yao Niannian was only the holy maiden in disguise. The holy maiden had already expressed her intention to leave the Yao family, but if Yao Niannian suddenly disappeared, the Yao family would not let the matter rest. They would certainly search the entire capital city, which would be very disadvantageous to them. Now, they could only confirm that Yao Niannian was dead. Previously, the holy maiden had asked him to dispose of Yao Niannian's corpse. Yuan Chuan had been careful and only used a secret technique of the southern frontier to temporarily prevent the corpse from rotting. Now, it was just in time to solve this urgent problem. Since they wanted to extricate themselves from the Yao family and confirm that Yao Niannian was dead, the Yao family was in a mess. Naturally, they would not have the mood to worry about other things. It's all right, Jiang Yuan smiled craftily, I have long prepared. Governor General Yao was furious. Originally, because of his daughter's death, he finally had a place to vent it. Originally, Yao Niannian had died for some unknown reason. Although Governor General Yao was heartbroken, he had also blamed Yao Niannian for not explaining the difficulties to his family. Now that this rumor had come out, Yao Niannian had become a loyal woman who wanted to protect her own mansion and was unwilling to betray the country. Governor General Yao's last trace of displeasure towards Yao Niannian had completely disappeared and was replaced by endless guilt. He hated himself for his incompetence and was heartbroken for Yao Niannian's sacrifice. His original thought of retiring to the imperial court and spending his remaining years in peace had suddenly changed. Now, Governor General Yao only had one thought, and that was to make the person who had forced Yao Niannian's death pay in blood. Very fast, Jiang Yuan exclaimed in admiration, let me see. Hanging herself in front of the Yao Fu's door, this reason is too strange. Who would hang themselves in front of their own door, and moreover, it was a young lady from a noble family. What are the people of the southern Xinjiang thinking? If it was any other woman, even if she was determined to die, she would not want everyone to see her miserable appearance before her death. Especially hanging herself, that appearance was not very pleasing. Yao Niannian was the daughter of a noble family. If she really wanted to hang herself, she would have chosen a room with no one around. Why would she brazenly hang herself in front of her own house and let so many people see her ugly appearance after her death? Obviously, the people of the southern Xinjiang had not thought things through. His subordinate was shocked. They had privately known that the holy maiden was in the capital. Didn't they say that everything had gone smoothly? These days, Yuan Chuan had also acted according to plan step by step and was very appropriate. How could the holy maiden have been exposed? Not only was his subordinate shocked, but Yuan Chuan was wearing a mask so others could not see his expression clearly. Only he himself knew that when he heard the news, he was also quite surprised. The holy maiden had entered the capital in secret. At the beginning, even he did not know about it. Replacing Yao Nianyan was also a good move. Everyone knew that the emperor had intended to betroth Yao Nianyan to Xiao Xiao. If Jiang Yuan had not interfered, Yao Nianyan would most likely be Jining Wangfei now. Yao Nianyan's identity was very natural. Moreover, Governor Yao was also a person of great importance in the Jin court. No matter in which aspect, he was extremely suitable. Who would have thought that this flawless plan would collapse today and the holy maiden would actually be exposed? The night seemed to pass peacefully. The next day, when the manservant guarding the entrance of Yao Fu got up to check, he suddenly found a figure hanging from a pillar at the Fu's entrance. Immediately, he was so frightened that he let out a loud cry. With this cry, he and the family servants were also called over. They saw that in front of the pillar at the entrance of Yao Fu, there was a figure hanging in a straight line. A rope was hung from the beam at the entrance, while the other end was wrapped around the neck of the corpse. At the foot of the corpse was an overturned stool. Obviously, this person had hanged himself. After the family servants had recovered from the lingering fear, they immediately felt a burst of bad luck and cursed, "Why did you choose to hang yourself in front of the door? Who is this person?" Liao Meng smiled and said, "Mother, you don't have to worry. Since second young master is working for His Highness, he might have something important to do these days. It's normal for him to be busy. She will come in a few days." Although she was comforting Mrs. Zhou, it was more like she was convincing herself. As Jean Eyre had not come for a long time, her heart could not help but be suspicious. In the end, what was going on? Could it be that the maidservant had used some means to entangle Jean Eyre? Jean Eyre did not come, and there was no news from that person over there either. Liao Meng thought uneasily, and she felt a little uneasy. Arguing with a person like Chen Shi was definitely not beneficial. Liao Meng could only insist that this had nothing to do with Chen Shi. With a cold face, she said, "Don't talk nonsense. You and I are only friends from the same hometown." Where did these words come from? Unexpectedly, Chen Shi suddenly said loudly, "Meng, I didn't want to say these things, but now you see me as an enemy. For any man, this is something that cannot be tolerated. Meng, you are heartless, so don't blame me for being unjust." As he said this, he took out a pure white handkerchief from his bag. It was just that the handkerchief was blooming with spots of red blood. At first, everyone was shocked, but then they understood. Naturally, they could imagine what it was. There were also young women in the crowd, and they immediately turned their heads away. Chen Shi said loudly, "This is the silk handkerchief that you used to consummate our marriage that night." "It's nothing." Xiao Xiao continued to look at the book in front of him as if nothing had happened. He lightly praised, "Furin is a good strategist." In a courtyard in the capital, two people were sitting in the room. One of them was guarding the door and doing embroidery, while the other young woman was looking down at the scroll in front of her, but her eyes were somewhat wandering. Mother Zhou was doing her embroidery and could not help but sigh, "Second young master has not come for a long time. I don't know if something has happened." Tianzhu nodded thoughtfully. Xiao Xiao looked up and glanced at Jiang Yuan. Jiang Yuan looked and immediately asked, "What's wrong?" "I'll also go and take a look." Liao Meng stood up and said. This courtyard was hidden in the capital, and Jean Eyre had also informed others to take care of them. Therefore, even if the two women lived here, no one would dare to disturb them. Hearing the noise outside, Liao Meng's first thought was that Lu Zhu had come to make trouble, so she prepared to go and take a look. That night, the one who had sex with her was not Jean Eyre, but Chen Shi. It was Chen Shi who had sex with her for a night, took away her handkerchief, and finally found out about the red mole on her back. How did Chen Shi come in, and why did Jean Eyre not fall for it? Liao Meng could not think of this. It was as if in a flash, she had lost all her strength and softly fell to the ground, her eyes became blank. It was a middle-aged man, about 30 years old, with a dark and thin body, who seemed to have come from the countryside, with a bit of the ruffian air of a bandit. With one look, one could tell that he was not a good person. That person also said, "Mother Zhou, you are really too forgetful. I am Dingshi's Chen Shi. When your Fu was in trouble, I even sent you things. At that time, Meng often came to me to ask for help. What, now that you have climbed up the social ladder in the capital, you turn your back on me?" Giving her a taste of her own medicine, Jiang Yuan said indifferently, "Originally, it wouldn't be a big deal if we were both serving different masters. However, to use such underhanded methods on my people, I'll let her have a taste of her own medicine." Liao Meng was such a proud person, how could she take a fancy to Chen Shi, but under the eaves, she had no choice but to lower her head. At that time, she could only pretend to be obedient to Chen Shi, pretending to be very obedient, so that Chen Shi and her uncle would not worry. With the help of the mysterious person, she escaped, thinking that she had finally escaped from that filthy life. But she did not expect that Chen Shi's appearance today would be like a basin of cold water being poured directly on her head, almost making her whole body tremble. Liao Meng was so angry that she almost fainted, but in the eyes of everyone, she was a lady from a noble family. Naturally, it was impossible for her to argue with Chen Shi on the streets. Even if she tried to explain in a soft voice, how could she compare to Chen Shi's glib tongue? Mother Zhou was furious. She stepped forward and scolded Chen Shi, "Chen Shi, don't talk nonsense. Miss was not betrothed to you at that time, it was simply your own wishful thinking. Why don't you take a piss and look at yourself in the mirror? How can someone like you touch Miss?" But she did not expect that when she reached the door, she would hear a man's voice, Liao Meng, come out." Meng Chen Shi seemed to have been hurt by her words as his eyes immediately turned red. He took a step forward and said in an extremely sorrowful voice, "How can you say that? You even gave your body to me, how can you say that you only have feelings of being from the same hometown? Even if you have a change of heart now and love that second young master Huang, have you ever thought about how second young master will treat you in the future if he sees that your body is not pure? How can you be so naive?" Before Liao Meng could react, Chen Shi had already started to narrate to the crowd. He only talked about how he and Liao Meng were in love at that time, and how they had obtained the approval of the elders. Just as they were about to get married, Liao Meng unexpectedly ran away the day before the wedding. He traveled across land and water to find her, only to hear that the matter between Liao Meng and Jean Eyre had spread like wildfire in the capital. He was heartbroken and angry, so he came to ask for an explanation. Chen Shi was also a clever person. He was born in the streets and had been in the streets for so many years. He could be said to have a glib tongue. His spittle flew like a storyteller as he pretended to be very affectionate, attracting the attention of most people. When they looked at Liao Meng again, their gazes had changed. It was as if they were looking at an unfaithful woman who only wanted to climb up the social ladder and abandoned her fiancé. "Don't worry about it," Xian Li said coldly. Even if they were allies, he would never risk his life to save those people at this time. Moreover, the people of Nanjiang did not know the severity of the matter and caused such a big mess. They even caused him to lose the Yao family. He had to vent his anger. Since the people of Nanjiang were so capable, he would leave this matter to them to solve it themselves. A smile appeared on Xian Li's face, but this smile did not look happy in the eyes of the crowd at all. On the contrary, it seemed to be restraining the anger and anxiety in his heart, which made it appear a little twisted. Chen Shi said, "Meng, you are with me, so I know everything about you. I also know that you have a small red mole on your back. Meng, if you want to ask me what evidence I have, do you dare to let others check your arm? See if the chastity mark is still there." When Chen Shi heard this, he gave Liao Meng a strange smile. That smile had an indescribable meaning in Liao Meng's eyes, as if she had been waiting for this sentence. No, Liao Meng calmed herself down. Her body was given to Jin Air. How could this Chen Shi have the ability to turn a deer into a horse? Nothing would happen. When this was said, the crowd suddenly burst into an uproar. What? This man's tone seemed to have some kind of personal relationship with Liao Meng. The man called her so intimately. It was said that Liao Meng was also from Dingxi. Could it be that there was something fishy between the two of them? It was true that people sympathized with the weak, but the people were more interested in the new strange things that happened among the people. When they learned that this seemingly weak and well-mannered young lady might have some unknown story, they immediately became excited. Nanny Zhou wanted to vent her anger for Liao Meng, but what she said was inappropriate. She said that Chen Shi was not worthy of Liao Meng. In this way, it seemed to reflect Chen Shi's words that Liao Meng was a greedy and vain woman. Liao Meng had already realized it, but Nanny Zhou was unaware and continued to scold. Liao Meng was helpless and could only take a step forward and say, Chen Shi, you are too much. There is no enmity between us. Why do you want to taint my innocence? Nanny Zhou's vision turned black and she fainted. Liao Meng forcibly suppressed the anger in her heart. Who would have thought that he would take out a handkerchief in the middle of the street? But Chen Shi was a hooligan who did not care about face at all. It was natural for him to do this. Chen Shi did not finish his words. He unfolded the handkerchief so that the crowd could see more clearly. Under the little red marks, the embroidery of the flowers on the handkerchief was very clear. In the lower left corner, there was the word Meng. Chen Shi continued, Meng, this handkerchief was given to me by you. It is your personal handkerchief. I have always been reluctant to throw it away. Liao Meng did not know who that person was. She only knew that after her parents passed away, her life was difficult. A mysterious person wrote a letter to her and showed her a bright path. This bright path was Jin Air. This was a good thing for Liao Meng. She almost did not hesitate to listen to that person's advice. That person did not say anything. He only said that he had the intention to help and did not want Liao Meng to pay any price. As long as Liao Meng got Jin Air in her hands, that servant girl would get lost. She had given up everything and traveled thousands of miles from Dingxi to the capital. She had sold her innocence, but she had never expected that it would be given to Chen Shi. Everything seemed to have returned to the beginning. She clearly knew one thing: she was finished. Why? She murmured. In Jinying Palace, Jiang Ruan drank a mouthful of pickled yellow paste and said, Xianli did not make a move. Xiao Xiao sat to one side and grunted. He did not raise his head and continued to read the book in front of him. He did not care, but Tianzhu could not help but ask, how did young mistress know that he would not make a move? Since he is an ally, he must help. Nanny Zhou was so angry that her face turned red. A series of insults had already come out. Liao Meng stared blankly at Chen Shi, then suddenly snapped back to her senses. Looking at the eyes of the surrounding people pointing at her, she felt like she had been stripped naked and thrown onto the streets. But now, she couldn't retreat. Once she retreated, it would be equivalent to admitting defeat. Admitting defeat, she had given up everything. It was definitely not for the sake of losing. Liao Meng gritted her teeth and looked at Chen Shi. Suddenly, she said, Chen Shi, you must pay attention to evidence. You dared to tarnish my reputation, you must take out the evidence. Otherwise, I will definitely report you to the officials and punish you. That's right. A man's voice came from behind the crowd. Liao Meng followed the voice and looked over. Jin Air was standing not far away. That face that always had a cynical smile that made her feel moved, no longer had its usual smile. There was only an unfamiliar cruelty. The imperial bodyguard who had delivered the letter saw that Xianli had not issued the order for rescue. He hesitantly asked, Your Highness, over there, these words did not seem to be false. Immediately, everyone's eyes were filled with doubt. But Chen Shi was not in a hurry. As if he still had infinite sincere feelings for her, he said, Meng, no matter how you treat me, I only have you in my heart. How can you erase our past? During your most difficult days, I supported you together. How can you forget all those things? Young mistress is thinking of. Tian Zhu looked at him suspiciously and said, that Miss Liao, so Meng, come back with me. Chen Shi immediately put on an affectionate expression, I don't care about anything. Even if you are now in love with the second young master of the Huang family, as long as you come back with me, we can still live a good life. Isn't it good? If you are like this, when the second young master finds out the truth, won't he be very angry? No man can tolerate his wife not being chaste. Meng, are you still going to be stubborn? N. Hearing this, Xiao Xiao raised his head and thought for a moment. He looked at Jiang Yuan and asked seriously, don't you have a plan? As long as he thought of this, Xian Li's heart was unspeakably depressed. This matter originally had nothing to do with him. Originally, he only wanted to use a borrowed knife to kill people. He only needed to watch from afar. In the end, he could just sit back and enjoy the fruits of others' work. He would not put himself in a dangerous situation. But he did not expect that the people of Nanjiang would fail. Not only did he not get anything good, he also lost himself. In Jining Palace, Xian Li could not help but grit his teeth. He already knew who had released the news, but he did not expect Xiao Xiao to use this method. Perhaps this was not Xiao Xiao's doing, but that woman. Jiang Yuan smiled slightly, since they have been in contact with your master for so many years, they are naturally not ordinary people. There is a lot of knowledge in hiding. But it is too far to tell you this. If we continue to waste time like this, they will definitely make the first move. As for making the first move, on the surface, it is to seize the opportunity, but in fact, the rhythm is already messed up. We also have other things to do right now. Liao Meng was startled, and then angrily walked out. Unable to hide her anger, she said, who is making such a ruckus here? She had almost become a celebrity in the capital. Everyone sympathized with her pitiful life experience, and she was bullied by a servant girl. As long as she frowned, there would naturally be people who would stand up for her. It was almost instinctive for people to sympathize with the weak. Perhaps Zhou Mama heard the uncertain tone in Liao Meng's mouth, and immediately sighed. When Liao Meng had used her innocence in exchange for Jean Eyre's unswerving loyalty, Zhou Mama felt that it was very inappropriate. Once it started, it was destined that there would be no way back. Moreover, using this method was always shameful. Only those concubines who wanted to climb the walls of the master's house would use such underhanded means. In any case, her own miss was a proper and well-bred young lady. Unexpectedly, she could even think of such a method. Zhou Mama was very shocked, but on the other hand, she felt sad for Liao Meng's situation. Even if the master behind the scenes has been caught, this little general will not let it go. Jiang Yuan smiled slightly, those who bully my people, there is no reason to let them go. Among the emperor's several sons, Xian Li was undoubtedly the calmest. In everyone's eyes, he was almost a gentle and elegant good man. He did things without leaking anything. Such a calm person could always give people a convincing sense of security. Those who had sought refuge with Xian Li naturally valued this point. Only, it was unknown when Xian Li had unknowingly changed. Not showing his emotions seemed to be a thing of the past, and the people who followed Xian Li could sometimes even feel the uncontrollable anxiety in Xian Li's heart. This was not a good thing for a person who was planning for big things. Liao Meng's vision turned black, and she almost fainted. Just now, when she came out, she did not see clearly what the person looked like. When she saw who it was, she was scared out of her wits. At that time in Dingxi, when her parents passed away, she guarded the family wealth. Those jackals and wolfish relatives were eyeing her covetously. Her own uncle wanted to marry her off as soon as possible so that he could swallow their family's huge wealth. This Chen Shi was a bully in Dingxi, a street ruffian. Usually, he bullied people and took advantage of Liao Meng's beauty. Liao Meng's uncle did business and had some friendship with Qin Shi, so he wanted to marry Liao Meng to Qin Shi. Xian Li fiercely took a breath. The southern Xinjiang sent a secret letter asking him to go help, but now, he absolutely could not take the risk. The people of the southern Xinjiang did not know that the Yao family also hated him. If at this time, he rashly made a move and was caught, wouldn't it be giving the Yao family something that could be used against him? The Yao family would definitely use this time to make a big fuss. Now, it was best not to act blindly without thinking. It was better to be safe. Both of them were still thinking about their own matters when they heard bustling sounds coming from outside the door. It seemed that there were also shoving, scolding, and shouting. Mother Zhou and Liao Meng looked at each other. Mother Zhou stood up and said, "I don't know what happened. This old servant will go out and take a look." After the matter with the Yao family passed, Jiang Ruan and Xiao Xiao did not take any other action. Although Xiao Xiao's deployment was precise, the opponent was also very cunning and did not show up. As a result, Tianzhu felt that it was somewhat boring all day. At this moment, when she heard Jiang Ruan's words, she immediately became excited. "Young mistress, what other tasks are there?" Later, everything went smoothly beyond Liao Meng's original expectations, but that mysterious person never appeared again. Liao Meng had also wondered whether that person had other motives, but to her, Jin Air was indeed a way out that she did not want to let go of. Liao Meng was only a woman and did not have much foresight. She could only instinctively grab what she wanted the most in front of her. Jiang Ruan was speechless. Of course, a trap had to be set. This trap was set up for the people of the southern Xinjiang. However, Xiao Xiao's usual style was like the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves. He would not let anyone go. As for Xian Li, naturally, there were also arrangements to ensure that nothing went wrong. What if Xian Li suddenly remembered his ally? Qin Shi had played the role of an angry and affectionate man who had been betrayed to the fullest. However, as soon as these words came out, Liao Meng felt as if she had been struck by lightning and almost fainted. That night when she and Jin Air were drugged, she had lit the incense given to her by the mysterious person and placed it together with the pot of orchids. She had drugged Jin Air and used her own innocence as the price to tie that man to death. After that night, her handkerchief had disappeared. Thinking that there must have been blood on it and that it had been taken away by Jin Air, she did not ask further. But now, it had appeared in Qin Shi's hands. Liao Meng's mind was muddled, but she could not help but have an absurd thought. That thought was very frightening. As soon as Qin Shi finished speaking, there was a sudden uproar in the surroundings. There were many meanings in Qin Shi's words. That Liao Meng looked at a pure and innocent girl, but she had long since lost her virginity. TSK, this was really hard to tell. Chapter 233. However, Jin Air did not even look at her. He walked over to Qin Shi and took out something from his sleeve to hand to him. The people around them who were standing nearby could see it clearly at a glance. It was a marriage contract. Jin Air turned around and looked condescendingly at Liao Meng, who had collapsed on the ground. "Since you've already been engaged, the marriage contract has been changed, and the elders in your family have agreed to it. The engagement with me from back then is no longer valid. Besides, you..." He did not finish his sentence, but the meaning behind his words was clear. A woman with an impure body, how could she have the right to be someone else's wife? Those who were originally on Liao Meng's side and had a good impression of her now looked at her in a completely different light. A victim, a gentle and weak girl, had suddenly become a slutty and shameless woman. Thinking about it, the maidservant who had been by Jin Air's side had also been wrongly accused. Sure enough, it was hard to know a person's face but not their heart. After Jin Air handed the marriage contract to Qin Shi, he turned to leave. However, Liao Meng was unwilling to give up and hugged one of his legs. She did not know what had happened and why the person that night had become Qin Shi. However, she was certain that all of this was within Jin Air's grasp. For the past few days, she had schemed against Jean Eyre, but how could she not like such a distinguished and handsome man like Jean Eyre? Naturally, there was some sincerity in her heart. Now that her sincerity had been trampled to the point that it was worthless, Liao Meng could not accept it. She asked bitterly, "Why did you do this? Did he not have any feelings for her at all?" All those days, this man was gentle, considerate, and humorous. The two of them had a great time together, but now, it was all just an act. She did not believe it. She wanted to find out the reason. When Jean Eyre heard this, he turned around and glanced at her again. His gaze was so cold that Liao Meng felt a chill run down her spine. Right after, the man in front of her bent down and leaned over to whisper in her ear, "It's probably because of her." Her. Liao Meng was stunned for a moment, but then she quickly understood that the her he was referring to was Dewdrop. He. Was it for the dewdrops? Was all of this really just an act of his? The man's voice was different from his usual gentleness. There was a kind of sinister coldness in his voice, almost threatening her. There is nothing wrong with using all kinds of methods to protect yourself. However, you should not use these methods on her. Liao Meng closed her eyes. She too was born into a prestigious family. Even though her family had declined, she was still the young miss of a respectable family. She couldn't even compare to a servant girl. As for that Jean Eyre, he looked gentle and affectionate, but it was just an illusion. He had disguised himself so well, but she had actually thought that she was the aureole behind him. This was really a complete joke. "Have you ever had feelings for me?" Liao Meng asked the last sentence with difficulty. "No." The answer was as expected. The man was as resolute and cruel as his expression. He turned around and strode away, never looking back again. She was overjoyed. He reached out a hand to grab Liao Meng and put on an affectionate expression. "Meng, it's all right. I still won't give up on you. Come, let's go home." Liao Meng struggled a few times but was unable to break free from Shi's grasp. Mother Zhou had not woken up yet and she was all alone. The people around her were looking at her like she was the plague. No one extended a helping hand. In their eyes, Liao Meng was now a notorious person. Under such circumstances, Shi effortlessly pulled Liao Meng away. In the end, he practically dragged her into a low and narrow room. The moment they entered the room, Shi's expression changed. He no longer had the affectionate expression from before. Without a word, he gave Liao Meng a slap and said, "Bitch." Liao Meng was slapped hard by Shi, but she could only blankly cover her swollen face. At this moment, she was in utter despair and could not see any way out. She had the marriage certificate and her chastity had been given to Shi. Even if she were to hold on to such a large family fortune, there was only one fate for her in this lifetime. And Shi was a person who held grudges. She had abandoned him to escape to Beijing and even tried to hook up with Jean Eyre. To Shi, this was an intolerable betrayal. He would definitely treat her even more harshly. Liao Meng was right. After Shi gave her a hard slap, he suddenly sneered, "Bitch, if you want a man so much, then I'll let you have a good time right now." He tore off Liao Meng's outer garment and pounced on her. There was an intense sound in the room. Shi's attack was filled with hatred. There was almost no connection between them. The intimacy that was like a violent storm made Liao Meng feel unbearable pain. She clenched her teeth tightly to prevent herself from crying, but the tears in the corners of her eyes slowly flowed down her cheeks. Shi would bring her back to Dingxi, so she could only be with Shi for the rest of her life. And with Shi's current estrangement from her, he would definitely not have an easy time in the future. Her uncle and aunt would take away all of the Liao family's assets. In the end, she would still end up with nothing and everything would return to square one. No, it might even be worse than square one. At least in the past, there was still some hope. But now, there was only a deep sense of despair. On the bustling street, Jean San and Jean Eyre were walking side by side. Jean San looked at Jean Eyre and said, You're really ruthless. Don't you always have a lot of pity for women? Jane Eyre had always pursued the reputation of being a gentleman among flowers. When dealing with women, he would always leave some leeway. But this leeway was only within an acceptable range. For example, if he wanted to kill a woman, he would do his best to make her suffer less before she died so that she could die a quick death. The members of the embroidered uniform guards were indifferent and cruel to life. No matter how different their personalities were, this would never change. Xiao Xiao had already reached the point of perfection. Xiao Xiao had already reached the point of perfection. Jane Eyre looked like he was always laughing and joking around, but he also followed this unchanging principle. It was just that this time, his method of dealing with this woman was indeed a little too cruel. He was the one who called Qin Shi over. Back then, when Liao Meng first consciously approached him, Jane Eyre already realized something was wrong. He personally investigated and got the people he knew in Dingxi to start investigating Liao Meng's matter. The embroidered uniform guards were naturally efficient in their work. Very soon, they received news of Liao Meng, and Qin Shi naturally appeared in Jane Eyre's sight. He got someone to bring Qin Shi over. The knockout incense that Liao Meng ignited that night had the effect of making people unconscious, but she had underestimated Jane Eyre. Moreover, Liao Meng was currently in the capital. Liao Meng's guess was right. That night, Qin Shi and Liao Meng had indeed fallen out. Jane Eyre had never felt that there was anything wrong with this, nor did he feel any guilt. As for guilt, he only felt it towards Lu Zhu, but he did not know how to explain it. Jin San could tell what he was thinking. He sighed and said, "Go back and explain it properly. Lu Zhu isn't an unreasonable person. You're doing this for the sake of the entire imperial household and also because you're worried about her safety. She'll forgive you one day." After hesitating for a moment, Jin San added, "But lying to a woman isn't something that can be easily forgiven, so you'd better be prepared." There was no need for Jin San to explain this principle. Jane Eyre already knew it himself. After all, he had been doing missions in brothels for so many years, so he naturally understood women. Liao Meng had lost to Jane Eyre because she had underestimated Jane Eyre's ability in matters of romance. If it wasn't as a last resort, Jane Eyre would not be willing to lie to Lu Zhu. However, this matter was of great importance. Not even the closest person to the brocade guard could know about the mission they were carrying out. This was because the brocade guard had persisted in using such strict methods for so many years. Sometimes, a mistake in a smile could cost them their lives. Jane Eyre did not tell Lu Zhu because he was responsible for the brocade guard. However, being alone in Shanghai like this, he had never felt so uncomfortable before. That day when he hit Lu Zhu, he tossed and turned restlessly in bed. After the argument with Lu Zhu, the conflict in his heart caused his hesitation and the unsightly expression on his face. It was not an act, but a lucky hit that had fooled Liao Meng. Jane Eyre felt a headache coming on as he thought about how to explain it to Lu Zhu. At Jinying Prince's residence, someone had already sent the news back. Lian Xiao naturally clapped her hands in delight. She laughed and said, "Indeed, evil people will be tortured by evil people." This Liao Meng was still saying that she was some noble young mistress, but she actually resorted to such underhanded methods. Recommending oneself to the bed is something that only the concubines and Tongfang of the Fu would do. How could an unmarried young mistress do such a thing? TSK, it's really laughable. But now, it's all right. Finally, her fake face has been torn off and people can see her true colors. How satisfying. Jiang Ruan did not speak. Her gaze fell on Lu Zhu, who had her head lowered and was in a daze. At this point, there was no longer any reason to hide it from Lu Zhu. Jiang Ruan told Lu Zhu the whole story. How to deal with it was Lu Zhu and Jane Eyre's business. However, looking at Lu Zhu's blank expression, Jiang Ruan could not help but feel a headache coming on. She said, "Lu Zhu, what do you think of this matter?" Lu Zhu did not expect Jiang Ruan to suddenly ask her. She was stunned and could not help but be speechless. Lian Xiao also stopped talking and looked at Lu Zhu. Yes, now that the truth was out, nothing had happened between Jin Er and Liao Meng. Everything was just a play to deal with the people of the southern Xinjiang. Therefore, no matter how much Lu Zhu hated Jin Er, there was no reason. Now, what choice would Lu Zhu make? I don't know. Lu Zhu murmured. This news was too shocking for her. She did not expect that everything was just a hoax. In that case, the sadness she had felt at the beginning was all fake. At this moment, she did not know what to do. She did not know how to face Jin Er. She could only subconsciously speak the voice in her heart. Jiang Yuan sighed. This matter was not urgent. She thought that Lu Zhu would probably need some time to accept this matter. As she was thinking, she saw Yi Feng hurriedly walk in and call out, "Young madam." Xiao Xiao had already gone out. At this moment, she did not know where he was. Looking at Yi Feng's appearance, he seemed to have an urgent matter. Jiang Yuan asked, "What happened?" Now that Xiao Xiao was not around, Jiang Yuan could handle the matters of the embroidered uniform guard. Jiang Yuan also had a sense of propriety. If she could not handle it herself, she would not rush to solve it. She would just put it aside and wait for Xiao Xiao to return. Yi Feng did not hesitate and only said, "The fake Yao Nian has been rescued. Have you found the person?" Jiang Yuan asked with a frown. No, but the people guarding the west of the city saw someone enter a house. They were suspicious and rushed in. When they discovered that the house was empty, they went in to search. There were traces of someone living inside. It should be the leader of the Nanjiang people. Yi Feng answered. According to what you said, it should be their reinforcements. At this moment, there is no news of Xianli taking action. Naturally, this person is not him. The other officials in the Jin court do not have this ability. Jiang Yuan muttered, in this case, it can only be the Nanjiang people themselves. To be able to escape under such a tight net, they are obviously very familiar with the terrain of the capital. I think that person is most likely a spy from the Nanjiang who has long been inside the capital. He must have hidden for many years to be able to rescue someone from under their noses. To be able to hide for so long without being discovered, for the Nanjiang people, this person may be a very good treasure. To be able to analyze so much based on just one incident, Yi Feng could not help but be startled. Then, he said in admiration, "Young madam is right. There was a brother who saw a person in the west of the city. At that time, he was in a hurry and did not take it to heart. Later, after thinking about it, he actually looked like the same person." Who? Jiang Fu's de Yinyang, Yi Shuang. Yi Feng said. Yi Shuang, this name was somewhat unfamiliar, and the Jiang Fu seemed to be something that happened a long time ago. When she heard these two words from Yi Feng's mouth, Jiang Yuan was also momentarily dazed. However, she quickly understood. Yi Shuang. In her mind, the de Yinyang who did not like to speak and was always invisible in the Fu came to mind. For so many years, this de Yinyang had always occupied a seemingly unimportant position in the minister's Fu, yet she still stood there. From the time when the Jiang siblings had been banished, and when Zhao Mei had died, she had been there. Now that the Jiang Fu no longer existed, she was still able to escape unscathed. This was an inconceivable matter. Jiang Yuan had once suspected her, but after the Jiang Fu fell, she had never seen her shadow again. Now, she had appeared in front of her, but in such a way. Since Yi Feng mentioned the west of the city, it showed that he suspected the relationship between Yi Shuang and the Nanjiang people. Jiang Yuan's gaze moved. This showed that her suspicions at that time were not completely unreasonable. Who was this Yi Shuang? What was her purpose in hiding in the Jiang Fu for so many years? And the timing of her appearance? Jiang Yuan's heart jumped, and a thought flashed through her mind. First, send people to continue watching the west of the city. Since they want to leave, they can't go far. That fake Yao Ninian must have an important position among the Nanjiang people, otherwise he would not have entered a household like the Yao family to work. It is very likely that he is the leader of the Nanjiang people, and the person who rescued Yao Ninian, since she has such ability, is not an ordinary person. To make a move under such a public target, she obviously has no fear of us. In this world, there is no such thing as conceit, so I thought that she must have made preparations. If she is Yi Shuang, with her temperament of hiding in the minister's fu for so many years, making a move at this moment can only mean that they have already made preparations. Now, it is time for the real move, and it will probably come soon. But Tianzhu asked doubtfully, hasn't this situation already been solved? The fake Yao Ninian's identity had been exposed, and the matter of Lu Zhu and Jean Eyre could be explained. Jiang Yuan and Xiao Xiao not only did not have a grudge against each other, but also cooperated quite well. This had already forced the Nanjiang people to cover their heads and flee like rats. How could they still make a move? Confronting us is not their goal. Jiang Yuan's tone was indiscernible, but there was a rare solemnity on her face. In other words, this is not her goal. These Nanjiang people are clearly divided into two factions. Although I do not know why, one faction is targeting me, and the other faction, she muttered to herself, is targeting that position. Now that Yao Ninian, who is targeting me, has failed, the Nanjiang people will only follow the orders of the other faction, and what that faction wants to do is nothing more than to wait for an opportunity. Now, that opportunity has come. Opportunity? Tianzhu was still somewhat puzzled, but Yi Feng seemed to understand something from her words, and his expression changed slightly. Jiang Yuan ignored him, turned around, and walked towards the study. Yi Feng, if there is anything special in the court recently, come in and tell me about it. That night, when Xiao Xiao returned, it was already very late. Normally, Jiang Yuan would have long gone to bed, but today, the lights in the room were still on. After returning to the room, Xiao Xiao was slightly stunned, then walked to her side and softly scolded, "Why are you still not sleeping?" "Waiting for you, I have something to tell you." Jiang Yuan raised her head. Xiao Xiao was startled again. Jiang Yuan's complexion actually showed a bit of exhaustion. This was very rare for her. Xiao Xiao did not leave, but took the opportunity to sit beside her and asked, "What happened?" Jiang Yuan told Xiao Xiao about what Yi Feng had told her. After listening, Xiao Xiao frowned and thought for a moment, then said, "I know." "No, this is not what I want to say." Jiang Yuan pulled his sleeve and looked at him. "Xiao Xiao, this is a bit strange, but I have a kind of intuition. I suspect that Yi Shuang is Qi Man." After saying this, Jiang Yuan also felt relieved in her heart. She did not know why she had this thought. Since her rebirth, Jiang Yuan had always had a special feeling towards De Yinyang, Yi Shuang. It was the intuition of a person who had died once, but this Yi Shuang hid it too well. Her patience was simply terrifying. Compared to her, Xianli was really too light. However, for so many years, Yi Shuang had not done anything at all. Jiang Yuan could not guess her intentions, but now that Yi Feng had said that she might be related to the southern frontier, it was like a key that had opened a door in Jiang Yuan's mind. Incomparably naturally, she had this idea. Xiao Xiao looked at her and did not speak. Jiang Yuan looked at his calm appearance and frowned. "You don't believe me?" This idea is indeed very absurd, but I did not just rely on intuition to make such a deduction. Tonight, I have been thinking about the time you described Qi Man's disappearance, and it seems that it is not much different from the time when De Yinyang came to the Fu. And if she is related to the people of the southern frontier, and the people of the southern frontier are still obedient even after many years of not seeing each other, the princess of the southern frontier is definitely able to do this. It's not that I don't believe you. Xiao Xiao's lips curled up. I also suspect her. Jiang Yuan was startled and said, "You already knew?" "It's just a suspicion." Xiao Xiao replied, "For so many years, the people of the southern frontier have been relentlessly pursuing me. I have also tried to find the Qi Man of the past, but to no avail. Qi Man must still be in this world. I have gone deep into the southern frontier several times, but I have not seen her shadow. Based on her calculative temperament, knowing of my existence, she will definitely stay in the capital to wait for an opportunity to take revenge. Therefore, I have been arranging for people to search the capital. Xiao Xiao sighed, it's just that recently, I have some clues. I also did not expect that she would actually hide in the minister's fu. A dignified princess of the southern frontier, with unparalleled beauty, but in the Jiang Fu, she had become an unfavored concubine. Of course, one could disguise one's appearance, but to disguise one's temperament for decades was a little too frightening. Jiang Ruan carefully looked at Xiao Xiao. After all, the people of the southern frontier were his blood enemies. Everyone had something to bear in their hearts. What Jiang Ruan bore was the hatred of her previous life, and what Xiao Xiao bore was the debt of blood of this life. This was his fate. After all, Xiao Xiao's current situation was all caused by Qi Man. His biological parents and adoptive parents had lost their lives because of the people of the southern frontier, and it was obvious how deep the hatred was. But now, it seemed that when Xiao Xiao spoke of Qi Man, his expression was still as calm as before, and Jiang Ruan's heart was at ease. She thought for a moment, then grasped Xiao Xiao's hand and said, "In this way, we know who the person behind this is. I think that they will soon make their move. Now that we are in the dark and they are in the light, we will be able to gain some benefits. This time, I will help you take revenge, how about it?" She wanted Xiao Xiao to be a little happier. Xiao Xiao could not help but smile, and stroking her hair, he said, "Okay. But it's still a little strange." Jiang Yuan said doubtfully, "I can see that the people of the southern frontier are now divided into two factions. One faction is the fake Yao Ninyan. These people have just arrived in the capital, and there are still many places in the capital that they are not familiar with, so they were able to be chased by the capital magistrate's officers and soldiers until they had nowhere to escape. Qi Man, on the other hand, is from the other faction. She has been lurking in the capital all year round, and has long since grasped many places in the capital, so she was able to rescue the fake Yang Yin so smoothly. These two people have different goals. Qi Man has been lurking for many years, and most likely, it is for revenge. That fake Yang Yin created the scene of Jin Er and Lu Zhu. It looks like she wants us to be at odds, but why do I feel that she is targeting me? What deep hatred do I have with her? Even if I hate the house and its crow, I should hate you first." Just as she finished speaking, she saw Xiao Xiao in front of her with a somewhat strange expression. Immediately, her heart stirred, and she grabbed Xiao Xiao's sleeve and said, "What's going on? Tell me clearly, could it be that you attracted these peach blossoms from somewhere? It's probably new trouble for me." The more she thought about it, the more she felt that it was possible. Jiang Ruan glared at Xiao Xiao, almost wanting to skin him alive. Cough, cough. Xiao Xiao could not withstand such pressure and lightly coughed twice. As if nothing had happened, he got up and said, I'm going to take a bath." Chapter 234. Then that night, Jiang Ruan finally got the information out of Xiao Xiao's mouth. It turned out that when Xiao Xiao first took over the genie guard, he went deep into Nanjiang to deal with the remnants of the Nanjiang kingdom. At that time, the head of Nanjiang was the younger brother of the prince before the Nanjiang kingdom was destroyed. The terrain of Nanjiang was complex and there were many poisonous insects and plants. It was not suitable for large-scale frontal confrontation. At that time, Xiao Xiao was young and brave. He directly went deep into Nanjiang alone and beheaded the head of Nanjiang. There must have been a dangerous price to pay, but Xiao Xiao was a person who paid attention to results. In the end, he succeeded. A young boy who had just come out of the thatched cottage had such great ability. At that time, in the mouths of the southern border people, it was already very terrifying. Xiao Xiao was born with unparalleled beauty, and his temperament was cold and mysterious. Naturally, he also attracted one person, the holy maiden of Nanjiang, Dan Zhen. Dan Zhen was the holy maiden of Nanjiang. At that time, Xiao Xiao was only about 14 or 15 years old. Dan Zhen was even younger. The two were clearly in a hostile position, but Dan Zhen had other feelings for Xiao Xiao. This was originally a very common thing. Xiao Xiao was really too eye-catching among his peers. As a holy maiden, Dan Zhen's days were originally pure of heart and few desires. Suddenly seeing a valiant and handsome youth, she naturally fell in love with him. However, the people of Nanjiang had always protected the holy maiden very well. Unlike Qi Man was a princess of the royal family. The people of Nanjiang protected her to protect the face of the whole country. Protecting the holy maiden was to protect the faith of the whole Nanjiang. It was just that the holy maiden could not marry and have children in her life. She was destined to be a lonely existence. And Dan Zhen's way of expressing her affection for Xiao Xiao was to pursue and kill him at all costs. This seemed to be very similar to the strong possessiveness of the people of Nanjiang. When Xiao Xiao returned to the capital with the head of Nanjiang, Dan Zhen sent dozens of masters to besiege Xiao Xiao and tried to bring him back. Even if it was to be a puppet or a slave, it would be good. On that day, Xiao Xiao killed dozens of masters one by one. On his way back to the capital with serious injuries, he met Jiang Ruan for the first time. When Xiao Xiao talked about this matter, he also conveniently talked about his relationship with Jiang Ruan. Jiang Ruan was also somewhat astonished. Earlier on, Xiao Xiao had said that he would repay her kindness, but in fact, she had not taken it to heart. It was probably because she had not been able to remember. But now, from Xiao Xiao's words, she had learned about the past, and Jiang Ruan herself was deeply moved. But in the end, after going around in circles, he ended up back in front of Dan Zhen. Jiang Ruan glared at him. Originally, although Yao Nianyan had not expressed any special feelings toward Xiao Xiao, because of the emperor's intentions, he had always been regarded as a rival in love. Moreover, when she had first met the real Yao Nianyan, Jiang Ruan had sensed the great waves in that woman's heart. She might not necessarily have no feelings for Xiao Xiao. Now that Yao Nianyan was dead, there was a Dan Zhen. Looking back, it had been many years. Thinking about how Xiao Xiao had been coveted by a woman for so many years, Jiang Ruan's mood was indeed not very pleasant. She said, "You really are a disaster that attracts bees and butterflies." Xiao Xiao was slightly startled, his expression somewhat helpless. How could he be blamed for this? He had been cold-hearted and had not been aware of Dan Zhen's intentions. Later on, even if he had been aware of Dan Zhen's intentions, it was nothing in his eyes. Perhaps life was very wonderful. Xiao Xiao himself had not expected that there would be a day where he would have the heart to protect a woman forever. Xiao Xiao himself had not thought of it, and Dan Zhen could not have thought of it even more so. The jealousy in a woman's heart had always been very frightening. If Xiao Xiao had been cold to everyone, perhaps Dan Zhen would not have met with a rebuff from Xiao Xiao. But one day, a woman had appeared and obtained Xiao Xiao's doting, and Dan Zhen had discovered that Xiao Xiao was not someone who only knew how to treat people coldly. No wonder she had always called me Hong and Junju. Not waiting for Xiao Xiao to answer, Jiang Ruan continued to speak, so it was because she minded my identity as a Wang Fei. From this, it could be seen that this person was not someone who was good at forbearance, at least when it came to feelings. Although she was also very good at using people's hearts, such as that day when she used dewdrops and Jean Air to achieve her goal, it was still extremely difficult for her to grasp her own emotions. Perhaps this was related to her own status. A high and aloof saint maiden, the people around her were all obedient to her, so how could she have encountered any setbacks? Jiang Ruan analyzed. In the process of the game, an opponent who was forbearance was obviously more terrifying. Jiang Ruan and Xian Pei were people who were forbearance because of the lessons of blood and tears from their previous lives. Moreover, when they were young, they had experienced the pain of being neglected. Xian Li's forbearance was also very good, especially for a person who was favored by the heavens. This was also the case for Dan Zhen. As a woman, being unable to control her own emotions was her biggest weakness. In comparison, that Qi Man was much more terrifying. Qi Man was the princess of Nanjiang country. Naturally, she had lived a life of golden branches and jade leaves. However, she had concealed her identity, changed her appearance, and hid in the minister's fu. She had become an unfavored first-in-yang. This was not an easy thing to do, especially after so many years without any flaws. Moreover, her flawless defense was her biggest flaw. Even Jiang Ruan could not help but feel somewhat apprehensive on this point. She was carefully thinking about Qi Man's matter. However, Xiao Xiao saw that she had been frowning and did not speak. He thought that Jiang Ruan was worried about Dan Zhen. No matter how steady Xiao Xiao usually was, he was always somewhat helpless when facing Jiang Ruan. He was not as good at making people happy as Jinair. Seeing that Jiang Ruan was unhappy, he felt somewhat nervous. After thinking for a while, he reached out and pressed Jiang Ruan's shoulder, saying, "How about killing her?" Jiang Ruan. This was too fast. She had not even said anything. If Dan Zhen knew what Xiao Xiao had said at this moment, she would probably go crazy with jealousy. She did not speak, so Xiao Xiao took it as a tacit agreement. Immediately, without saying anything, he moved closer and pinched her chin. Jiang Ruan was startled. She did not expect that when she did this, Xiao Xiao would kiss her. Housekeeper Lin had said that women were always soft-hearted. If good words could not be coaxed, then he could only kiss her. The harder he kissed, the better it would be. Xiao Xiao's strong offensive directly blocked Jiang Ruan's words. Seeing this, the initiator was very satisfied. Indeed, housekeeper Lin did not lie. This method was really not bad. In an unremarkable courtyard in the capital, at this moment, there did not seem to be anything different. Servants were carefully sweeping outside the courtyard and doing embroidery. It looked as if the life of some small wealthy families was comfortable. However, if there was a master here, and if he observed carefully, he would find that these servants did not seem to be so simple. There were 3 people in the room. The woman sitting on the high seat looked somewhat haggard. Her appearance was also ordinary. However, even if it was an ordinary appearance, at this moment, she looked somewhat different. This person was none other than the minister's first concubine, Yi Shuang, or rather, the former princess of Nanjiang country, Qi Man. If there were people from the minister's fu who saw Qi Man at this moment, they would certainly be shocked. Her appearance was still the same as before, but her temperament was as if she had become a different person. She had an ordinary appearance, but the expression on her face seemed to be seductive. Every move was charming, but there was a trace of indescribable coldness in the charm. She was like a different person from the former Yi Shuang who did not like to talk much. "Aunt, what should we do next?" The woman sitting on the lower right side of Qi Man asked. This woman's voice was obviously younger. Her pair of eyes, which were exposed outside the veil, were extremely intelligent. Just one glance seemed to be able to drip water. She was dressed in red, and there was a kind of mysterious beauty all over her body. However, this beauty made people feel that she was much more dangerous. "Don't be anxious," Qi Man said slowly. "Aunt is right, but Aunt is used to being patient. She has been staying in the capital of the Great Jin dynasty for more than 10 years. I am afraid that she has forgotten the identity of the princess of Nanjiang country. However, now that we have come back for revenge, how can we be chased like rats on the street? Where will the face of my Nanjiang country be?" These words seemed to be nothing, but it was not difficult to detect the sarcasm in them when listening carefully. Qi Man did not speak, but Yuan Chuan, the masked man sitting on the lower right side of Dan Zhen, could not help it. He glanced at Qi Man uneasily and said slowly, "Princess, do you have a plan?" What did Nanjiang country think of Qi Man? Although the Great Jin dynasty was their enemy and the culprit who destroyed Nanjiang country, everything was caused by Qi Man. If she did not provoke Crown Prince Hongxi, or if she did not kill Xiang Xiaoyuan so ruthlessly, how could Nanjiang country end up like this? At the beginning, the emperor of the Great Jin dynasty ordered the destruction of Nanjiang. Of course, it was to expand the territory, but the more important reason was to avenge Crown Prince Hongxi. It was not an exaggeration to say that Qi Man was a scourge to Nanjiang country. People in Nanjiang country had a lot of complaints about her. However, for so many years, Qi Man had disappeared, so naturally, there was nothing to say. Dan Zhen was Qi Man's niece. If it were not for Qi Man, she would still enjoy the treatment of the royal family. But now that Nanjiang country had been destroyed, she could only be a holy girl who would never marry. Although her status was high, her life was monotonous. Dan Zhen also resented Qi Man. More importantly, now that they were in the capital city, it was equivalent to having two masters in Nanjiang country. How should the subordinates be dispatched and who was the boss? There must be a struggle. In terms of seniority, Qi Man was naturally the current master of the southern border. But for so many years, the people under her had all listened to Dan Zhen's orders. If they just gave it to Qi Man, how could Dan Zhen be willing in his heart? Yuan Chuan could see clearly that Qi Man was unfathomable, but Dan Zhen would never admit defeat. But at this critical moment, it was not the time to have internal strife. So he spoke to ease the secret sharpness between them and asked about Qi Man's deployment. Unlike Dan Zhen's temperament was more casual. This time, she came to the capital city.
Although she said that she wanted the great Jin dynasty to pay with blood, her mind had always been on that person. And Qi Man's goal from the beginning had never changed. That terrifying goal was to make the entire great Jin dynasty pay with blood. The people of the Jin dynasty are reckless and always think themselves clever. A few days ago, you were used to kill with a borrowed knife and hurt your own family, Qi Man said slowly. Dan Zhen's expression changed. Yao Nianyan's identity had been exposed. It was her shame to have to flee all over the capital city. Qi Man was ruthlessly humiliating her. Qi Man continued, "This time, we will kill with a borrowed knife." She smiled slightly, her eyes seemed to be very happy. No, it should be said that when the sandpiper and the clam fight, the fisherman benefits. After saying this, Qi Man got up and walked out of the room. After Qi Man left, Dan Zhen clenched her fists fiercely. Gritting her teeth, she said, "What? Holy girl, be careful with your words." Yuan Chuan said, at a critical moment, "Try to restrain yourself." He said it briefly, believing that Dan Zhen could understand. Dan Zhen snorted coldly. Although her expression was still somewhat unwilling, she followed his words and said, "Naturally." At the same time, in the 8th Prince's Fu, Xianli was quietly playing with the thumb ring on his thumb. Unlike the previous few days of impatience, the current him was calm and composed, unspeakably leisurely, as if he already had a well-thought-out plan. The advisor sat quietly at the side until the imperial bodyguard flew in to report, "Your Highness, the letter has been sent to the palace." Xian Li's movements suddenly paused, and he sat up straight. He only said, "Good." His gaze suddenly became somewhat excited. This was rarely seen on the usually restrained Xian Li. It was as if the thing that he had been planning for a long time had finally been completed. "Congratulations, Your Highness." The advisor stood up and bowed. "This time, we will definitely be able to catch them unprepared. After continuous battles, the great undertaking is in sight." Xian Li waved his hand, his face regaining its calmness. Even so, the corners of his eyes could not help but show some pride, being in a passive position, letting the opponent lower their guard, then attacking when they are unprepared. With full preparation, so what if it is Jining Wang? He is still helpless. Your Highness is wise to draw a clear line with the people of southern border early on. Now, you are using them to divert the attention of Jining Wang Fu. Jining Wang is currently focusing on southern border, and the 13th prince has no time to attend to it. Your Highness can do whatever you want. The advisor praised in a timely manner. Xian Li shook his head, the people of southern border are extremely ambitious. They also want to share half of the country with me.
If southern border is not eliminated, it will become a great calamity in the future. It is better to act as bait for me, drawing the attention of Jinying Wangfu. In this way, the two tigers will fight and both sides will suffer. This is advantageous to me. It is just that Your Highness, the advisor hesitated slightly, I am afraid that the 13th prince has a contingency plan in the palace. The 13th prince is cunning by nature and will not be so easily fooled. Xian Li smiled slightly, this is natural. If I did not have complete confidence, how would I dare to take this step? Now that things are going according to my plan step by step, it is enough to show that he has not discovered that placing his gaze on the outside and winning over the ministers is stupid. This bloody battle will eventually be resolved in the palace, and the one who can make the final decision is only Imperial Father. Neglecting the essentials to pursue trifles, Xian Pei has committed a great taboo. Xian Li still had the mind to teach Xian Pei a lesson on his loopholes. With his cautious temperament, he most likely had complete confidence now and was very confident. Now, we only need to wait for the results. Xian Li said. On this day, the emperor went to court as usual. These days, the number of days the emperor went to court was getting shorter and shorter, and the time he spent reading memorials was also getting longer and longer. There were more and more memorials accumulated in the imperial study. Some of the ministers also began to feel depressed, guessing that something was wrong with the emperor. But when someone wanted to inquire about the news from Dong Xiuyi, who was by the emperor's side, the news they received was that the emperor was fine and there was no problem. The other favored concubine who was close to the emperor, Mu Shiro, was a cold beauty. Naturally, they did not expect to obtain any news from her. But the more Dong Xiuyi said so, the more the ministers' guesses became. But at least on the surface, the previous court was still calm. Only the old ministers who had been in the sea of officials for many years could keenly sense that there was something different, and had a premonition that a huge storm was about to sweep the entire Great Jin dynasty. So on this day, the storm of the Great Jin dynasty suddenly arrived, completely disrupted the peaceful days of the past few decades, and set off a huge storm. When the emperor, the ruler of a country, went to court, while listening to the memorials from the Ministry of Rites, he fell from the dragon throne and fell into a coma. Until now, he had not woken up. All the imperial physicians of the big hospitals were mobilized, but now they were also helpless. The court was in an uproar. At this time when the fight for the throne was reaching its climax, there were people from the southern border sneaking into the capital, and there were internal and external troubles. The ruler of a country had unexpectedly fallen. What was even more frightening was that no one knew when this ruler would wake up. Seeing the serious expressions on the faces of the imperial physicians of the imperial hospital, all the ministers simultaneously had a terrible thought: if he could not wake up, then the country of the Great Jin dynasty would probably be thrown into chaos. The ministers did not dare to speak of this matter everywhere, not even to their relatives. But if there was any possibility of causing panic among the people, letting people know of the precarious situation of the Great Jin dynasty's royal family, it could bring about endless hidden dangers. After all the ministers returned to their mansions that day, they began to seriously consider what they should do next. If the emperor did not wake up, a fierce battle between the 8th prince and the 13th prince was bound to occur, and in this fierce battle, they would stake their own status and obtain endless glory, splendor, wealth and rank. The officials in the capital began to discuss and plan, but in the palace, in the midst of the gloomy atmosphere, there was a kind of small chaos. This kind of chaos and panic was forcibly suppressed by various palace rules, but even so, the panic was still spreading rapidly. The fall of the emperor meant that an era might come to an end, and a new era might have to start anew. However, the crown prince had not yet been appointed, and the crown prince was still ominous. This was the source of all the panic. Every time there was a struggle for the throne, at the end, there would be countless corpses and blood flowing like rivers. The people might not be able to see it, but the people in the palace would keep it a secret, and those terrible scenes would be deeply implanted in the hearts of every person in the palace. The imperial physicians of the Imperial Academy of Medicine were helpless, and Empress Dowager Ida was furious. She had issued an order to fight to the death, but it was still to no avail. At the crucial moment, when Xian Pei learned of this matter, he suggested to Empress Dowager Ida that perhaps they could find Jin Ling's divine physician, Xia Qing. Xia Qing and Xiao Xiao were fellow apprentices, so Empress Dowager Ida sent someone to invite Xia Qing in. Xia Qing came very quickly, and after seeing the emperor's condition, she shook her head under Empress Dowager Ida's expectant gaze. She only said 8 words, "The poison has gone deep, and there is no cure." There was no cure. As soon as these words came out, it was an announcement that the emperor might not have much time left to live. Poison? Empress Dowager Ida grasped the crux of these words. Where had the emperor been poisoned? After having people search the inside and outside of the palace, they still couldn't find out where the poison had come from. Even someone as experienced and knowledgeable as Xia Qing couldn't see where this poison had come from. The poison had gone deep, and the toxicity was fierce. He had no time and no means to save the emperor. It was likely that before he could find out what was going on with the poison, the emperor would have already lost his life. For better or worse, he was hanging on with medicine, but that was only a temporary solution. In the end, there was no other way. Empress Dowager Ida was furious, and in front of all the imperial physicians, she said that if the emperor died, all the women in the imperial harem would be buried with him. This was the cruelty of the royal family. When they were alive, these women might have lived a life of luxury that everyone envied, but in fact, they were just playthings attached to the emperor. If the emperor died, there was no need for them to live. Empress Dowager Ida said this in front of the imperial physicians, but even so, the women in the imperial harem realized something. It wasn't their first day in the palace, and it wasn't like the previous dynasty didn't have the rule of burying concubines with him. The emperor had suddenly fallen, and the imperial harem was immediately filled with an atmosphere of fear. Everyone was anxious, and it was almost the first time that they had all prayed for the emperor's early health. Among the panicking imperial harem, there were 2 people who were unusual. One was Mu Shiro. Mu Shiro was naturally a cold beauty. Usually, she was indifferent to everything, and even the emperor's love couldn't make her look better. The other was Dong Yinger. After entering the palace, Dong Yinger's mood was gentle and steady, and she was a little too mature. These 2 people weren't as panicked as the others, so it was understandable. However, how long could the current tranquility be concealed? Everyone knew that a storm was brewing. At this time, in the southern court, Xian Pei was sitting in front of a table, practicing his calligraphy stroke by stroke. Even at this time, he still had the mood to practice calligraphy. If others saw this, they would definitely be very surprised. But what was surprising was not so. Judging from the person's words, Xian Pei's calligraphy was very steady. Obviously, he wasn't affected by the emperor's fall at all. He was as calm as ever, as calm as if he had already expected this to happen. "Your Highness, the 8th prince is now ready to make a move," Mingyu said. This is a trap he set up. Now that the battle has started, he will definitely start attacking. How will your Highness solve this? The emperor's poison was planted by Xian Li. This was something that Xian Pei knew very well. With his understanding of his elder brother from his previous life, he could say that he understood Xian Li more than the emperor. This gentle and indifferent elder brother's heart was so cruel. He calmly used this move to kill his father. The emperor's fall was caught off guard, but this poison had been planted a long time ago. Xian Li thought that he had grasped the initiative this way. Before the emperor had clearly chosen a crown prince, perhaps this was Xian Li's strategy to win in the chaos. But for Xian Pei, letting nature take its course was also his strategy. Xian Li was ruthless, but Xian Pei's heart wasn't soft either. For example, in this life, he watched helplessly as the emperor was poisoned by Xian Li. Chapter 235. Mingyu had followed Xian Pei for a long time, and was originally from the Brocade Guard. Naturally, she could roughly guess some things in her heart. Admittedly, Xian Li's move was sudden. With his control of the situation, it might have looked like he had the upper hand. But Mingyu knew, in reality, that was not the case. Perhaps this handsome young man in front of her had seen through Xian Li's intentions a long time ago. Although this seemed somewhat inconceivable and she did not know why, Mingyu knew that Xian Pei had been planning to deal with Xian Li for a very long time. From the time when everyone looked down on him and thought that he was just a useless prince, but it was this useless prince who laid out a good move. When Xian Li ordered people to poison the emperor, Xian Pei knew long ago. But he did not say anything or do anything. It was as though he did not know of the matter and did not do anything to stop it. Dealing with changes by remaining unchanged, killing with a borrowed knife, confusing the other, Xian Pei's actions were foolproof. Every person who fought for the throne had to step on the blood of the previous emperor. Blood relations and flesh and blood were not important. If Xian Pei wanted to fight with Xian Li for the position, he first had to take down the present emperor. Xian Li acted. Xian Pei did not do anything wrong. This was also using Xian Li's hand to achieve his goal. More importantly, Xian Li would think that Xian Pei did not know anything. A person who knew of this matter would not be helpless. But Xian Li's prediction was wrong. Xian Pei did know and did everything. For an adult to be able to do all this did not seem like much. For someone like Xian Li who was extremely ambitious and good at hiding, it was like this. But Xian Pei was only a youth who had not yet reached marriageable age. For a youth to have such cold and decisive methods, to have the calmness and vision of an emperor, he was definitely not a person of the pond. Ever since the emperor knew of his son's talent, he had always treated Xian Pei well. A person who suddenly received his father's love and care would cherish this little bit of affection. But Xian Pei did not. He indifferently watched the emperor die step by step, and did not show any change in expression. The most heartless emperor's family, but this calmness and indifference caused Mingyu to be shocked. What this youth displayed was more suitable to be the ruler of a country than Xian Li. What Mingyu did not know was that Xian Pei was not born to be so decisive. After his last life, Xian Pei had seen very clearly the feelings he had toward the imperial family. The reason the emperor valued him so highly was because he valued the things he had displayed. If he didn't have these things, he would still be a useless prince. As for why Jiang Yuan had fallen to such a state in the palace in her previous life, how could the emperor not have had a part to play in it? In Xian Pei's eyes, the only family member in the world was Jiang Yuan. The emperor was only a ruler, not a father. His lifespan had already been decided in his previous life. He would eventually die at the hands of his own son, Xian Li. And Xian Pei wanted to make use of this point, so he would not deliberately break it. He slowly took a deep breath and said, Xian Li's next step must be the imperial edict. If he wants to get the imperial edict to establish the crown prince, he will act very quickly and catch us off guard. This is his old trick. Mingyu had some doubts in her heart. From Xian Pei's tone, it seemed like he had fought with Xian Li for many years and understood him very well. However, how could Xian Pei have ever fought with Xian Li directly? It was just hitting a cow through the air, showing that they were on equal footing. Even so, she still said, "What does your highness think?" Xian Pei smiled lightly. He was born with delicate features, and when he smiled, there was an indescribable beauty and elegance in the corners of his eyes, which actually somewhat resembled Jiang Yuan's. No need to pay attention to it. Striking the mountain to scare the tiger, we will naturally do this as well. Eunuch Li walked out of the emperor's bedchamber and glanced inside with some worry. The emperor's body had already started to slowly collapse a long time ago. This was something he had known for a long time, but at that time, he had only thought that it was because he was getting old and that time was unforgiving. Every emperor would grow old like this, it was inevitable. But, the emperor's collapse was too sudden. Under the watchful eyes of all the civil and military officials of the Great Jin dynasty, his abrupt collapse was enough of an order for the Great Jin dynasty's officials, and this order was related to a considerable storm in the future. Eunuch Li had lived in the palace for so many years that he knew that an era would eventually end. This was an unavoidable fact. Following the emperor's death, he, as the chief steward who had accompanied the emperor for so many years, would naturally follow. Eunuch Li was not afraid. What he was afraid of was that before everything was settled, the great Jin dynasty's successive emperors, whether or not they followed the path of succession, naturally had to stabilize the crown prince's position before the death of the previous emperor. But the current situation was different. The crown prince's position was still empty, which meant that once the emperor died, the great Jin dynasty's previous court would inevitably be in a mess. Coinciding with the conspiracy of the people of the southern frontier, it could be said to be extremely unfavorable. The emperor would not allow this to happen, but he had done it. When everyone thought that he would soon appoint a new crown prince, he had given the two princes the cold shoulder and did not make a decision. Perhaps the 13th Prince Xian Pei was young and did not take it seriously, so he did not make any moves. But Eunuch Li could clearly see that the 8th prince could not sit still, and his troops began to increase rapidly. Perhaps he was also puzzled, why did the emperor not appoint a crown prince? Why? Naturally, it was because of that person. Eunuch Li sighed, and his gaze instantly became somewhat aged. Only he knew the emperor's plans, and perhaps that person also knew. But he used an extremely unyielding attitude to reject the emperor's arrangements. He was not willing to accept the emperor's plans. That person. Eunuch Li let out another long sigh. In the past many years, the total number of sighs he had sighed was not as many as he had sighed in the past few days. If it had been someone else, Eunuch Li could believe that no one would be able to defy the emperor's plans. Regardless of whether it was for the greater good of the people, or because of the temptation of that position, but if it had been that person who had always done things his own way, who disdained everything, he was afraid that he would really just leave. When two equally unyielding people were together, what would be the end result? Eunuch Li no longer thought about it. Just thinking about it gave him an incomparable headache. In the past few days, many people had already made indirect attempts to inquire about the situation. The spies sent by the 8th prince had also intentionally or unintentionally leaked information to him. Eunuch Li was a tactful person. Having lived peacefully in the palace for several decades, anyone who saw him would have to give him some face. But now, he was truly at his wits' end. He felt that he had sunk into a dead end. He really began to feel that he was really old. At this time, Eunuch Li suddenly couldn't help but think of a person. That person had entered the palace at about the same time as him. At that time, he was a nameless little eunuch. That person was a student of the Imperial College. He didn't know how they became friends. Later, when Eunuch Li slowly began to establish a foothold in the palace, that person was already the current Tanhua rank of the Imperial Court. Eunuch Li had always been a little jealous of him. In the end, that person resolutely resigned from his position and went into seclusion because of one matter at the most prosperous time. At that time, his colleagues were puzzled and he left. Only Eunuch Li understood why he left. Because he was the person who saw it the clearest. Perhaps when he resigned from his position, he had already anticipated that there would be such a struggle today. He decisively retreated in the face of the crisis and left this chaotic situation early. If he was here, how would he deal with this situation now? Eunuch, Xiao Chen looked at him and said timidly. Eunuch Li suddenly came back to his senses. Only then did he realize that he had unknowingly thought very far. Why did he suddenly think of this? Was it really because he was old? Eunuch Li sighed. Xiao Chen looked at him and comforted. Eunuch Li is worried about His Majesty's dragon body. His Majesty has the protection of a true dragon and will definitely turn misfortune into fortune. He will definitely be fine. Eunuch Li, do not worry too much. Xiao Chen had been single-handedly promoted by Eunuch Li. It was common knowledge that eunuchs did not have children, but not all eunuchs were willing to accept this fate. Eunuch Li had always treated Xiao Chen very well. Once, when Xiao Chen made a mistake, he said a few words in passing and saved his life. Xiao Chen recognized Eunuch Li as his adoptive father. Now, Seeing that Eunuch Li was not his usual self, he naturally had to express his concern. Ah! Eunuch Li sighed and looked at the young man in front of him. How long could he stay in this position? But the young man in front of him had always been very rash and naive. If he had not protected him, he did not know how many times he would have died in this palace. After he left, who could help this boy turn misfortune into fortune? Eunuch Li felt a little melancholy. He looked at Xiao Chen and said, "It's best if you don't come out these days. If it's possible, I will inform the other side. You should temporarily leave the palace and hide. Just say that you are returning to your hometown to attend a funeral or something. You should not stay in the palace." "Why?" Xiao Chen asked curiously. "Adoptive father, His Majesty's dragon body is not well. After all, he has nothing to do with us servants. Why does he have to leave the palace? Don't ask so many questions." Eunuch Li glared at him. The way to survive in the palace was that the more one knew, the earlier one would die. This was something that was known long ago. Yet, this child did not know anything and kept bumping into things. "Adoptive father, what do you think the situation in the palace will be like next? Will His 8th Highness and His 13th Highness start fighting? Previously, when I was working outside, His 8th Highness praised me and seemed to want me to go to the palace over there. Do you think I might get a chance?" Xiao Chen did not hide his happiness at all. It was as if Xian Li threw an olive branch to him, he would immediately rush over. This was not rare. All the young eunuchs in the palace did not want to live in obscurity. They always hoped that they could amaze the world with a single brilliant feat at least. The position of the chief steward was attractive enough. Xiao Chen said his plan out loud. Not only was it not a reflection of his ambition, but it was also a little silly. Eunuch Li was shocked when he heard this. He knew the emperor's plan better than anyone else. If Xiao Chen really went to His 8th Highness's side, he would be implicated even if he showed the slightest bit of goodwill. Eunuch Li had always been a tight-lipped person. Everyone wanted to get information from him, but they always failed. Now, facing his adopted son, Eunuch Li's reluctance finally won over his years of experience. He pulled Xiao Chen to the side and whispered, "Lower your voice. Don't get involved in these things. Don't agree to His 8th Highness's side either." "Why?" Xiao Chen asked curiously. This kid always asked why. Eunuch Li was a little anxious, but if he did not explain clearly, he felt that Xiao Chen would not give up his plan. Helpless, Eunuch Li could only vaguely say, "No one can understand His Majesty's plan. His 8th Highness is not a candidate. Don't get yourself into trouble." With just one sentence, a smart person would immediately understand the meaning of Eunuch Li's words. This was because Eunuch Li's meaning was very clear. The emperor's intention was not on the 8th prince. Choosing the 8th prince was actually choosing the losing side. Eunuch Li said, "Remember what I said to you today. Don't say these words to anyone else." Xiao Chen nodded with fear. No matter how stupid he was, he could still understand the meaning behind Eunuch Li's words. This was the first time that Eunuch Li had done something that was not befitting of his status as a chief steward. He had revealed the emperor's information to an outsider. No matter how tactful and indifferent he was, he still treated his adopted son as his own son. He was not willing to let him walk a dead end. After Eunuch Li finished speaking, a young eunuch came in from outside to report that Empress Dowager Ida of the Palace of Compassionate and Peaceful had summoned him. Eunuch Li went in person, but he didn't see that behind him, Xiao Chenzi, who had lowered his head, slowly raised his head. His face, which had always looked simple and honest, had now lost its usual silly look. Instead, it was replaced by an unfathomable expression. Then, his gaze moved quickly, and then he lowered his head again, as if nothing had happened, and walked out as if nothing had happened. The matter of the emperor's serious illness in the palace caused a huge uproar in the previous dynasty. But this matter was not over. Following that, things happened one after another. Eunuch Li disappeared. As the emperor's chief steward, Eunuch Li had always been in charge of the emperor's daily life. He was the person who understood the emperor the best. Eunuch Li's disappearance even alarmed Empress Dowager Ida. The guards on night duty said that they did not see anyone go out at night, so Eunuch Li must still be in the palace. After almost the entire palace was turned upside down, someone finally found Eunuch Li's corpse in the dry well behind Jingyang Palace. There were no other traces on the corpse, and even a suicide note was found on Eunuch Li's body. Eunuch Li had committed suicide by jumping into the well. How could a chief eunuch commit suicide by jumping into the well? Eunuch Li's suicide note only expressed that he was sorry to the emperor for not being able to accompany the emperor until the end. But some people guessed that Eunuch Li saw that the emperor did not have long to live, and his worries were too much. Finally, he was so frightened that he jumped into the well to commit suicide. Although this was somewhat inconceivable, it was not entirely impossible. As the head steward, his fate was naturally closely linked to the emperor's. The coroner had already checked and found that Eunuch Li had indeed committed suicide by jumping into the well. Of all times, it had happened when the emperor was gravely ill. If this was not the case, then what else could it be? Most importantly, apart from this, no one could find any other reason that could have caused the head steward to commit suicide. After all, Eunuch Li was the head steward of the palace. Even if he did not have any meritorious services, he had worked hard for the emperor for so many years. However, Eunuch Li no longer had any relatives by his side. Instead, it was a little eunuch who volunteered and said that he was Eunuch Li's adopted son and was willing to handle the funeral for Eunuch Li. Such a sentimental little eunuch was praised by the higher-ups. Thus, Eunuch Li's wealth and silver naturally became Little Chen Zi's. Because of this, Little Chen Zi was also valued, and he somewhat resembled the head steward of the past. When the matter of Eunuch Li reached Jiang Ruan's ears, Jiang Ruan was discussing the account book with Steward Lin. Because it was a report from the embroidered uniform guard, she did not avoid Steward Lin. Eunuch Li's death could not be said to not be sudden. As Jiang Ruan thought about it, she suddenly discovered that Steward Lin also had a dazed expression. This Steward Lin, who had been very spirited just a quarter of an hour ago, abruptly became absent-minded. It was somewhat strange. Jiang Ruan carefully looked at him and unexpectedly discovered a trace of sadness in Steward Lin's eyes. Sadness? Jiang Ruan's eyes moved and she reminded him, Steward Lin. Steward Lin abruptly returned to his senses, as if he had just realized that he was absent-minded. For a moment, he was at a loss for what to do. Then, somewhat flustered, he said, "This. Young madam, this old servant has failed in his duties." Jiang Ruan smiled slightly, "It's not your fault. Suddenly hearing about the shocking news in the palace, it's normal for you to be a little dazed. I was also startled just now." Steward Lin was absent-minded and seemed to be thinking about this matter. "What is your opinion on this matter?" Steward Lin laughed dryly. Just as he was about to say that he was untalented and shallow in learning, how could he distinguish the knack in this matter? However, when he met Jiang Ruan's gaze, he was unable to say anything. Jiang Ruan's gaze was as gentle as it was in the past, with a sharpness that seemed to be able to see through people. She seemed to have long noticed that there was something wrong with him, and she was sensitive enough to grasp it. Now, she had merely asked about it. In terms of guessing people's hearts, no one was more outstanding than the princess of the Wangfu. Steward Lin straightened his expression and put away the awkward expression from before. In an instant, it was as if he had become a different person. He said, "Eunuch Li has been in this position for many years and has seen great winds and waves. He would certainly not commit suicide because of a temporary matter. He left behind a will, but it was all about irrelevant matters. It was really full of flaws. This old servant boldly guesses that Eunuch Li did not commit suicide, but was murdered by someone who disguised it as a suicide." When he said this, although his tone was restrained, he could not help but reveal a trace of anger. Jiang Ruan nodded and said softly, "That's right." Then, In Steward Lin's opinion, who killed him? Since Eunuch Lee had reached the position of the head steward, his mind was smooth and sly. Ordinary people would naturally not be able to deceive him. Only those who were close to him would be able to make a move. Since this person was able to make Eunuch Lee completely defenseless, it must be someone who had been with him day and night, and had already gained his complete trust. There is no doubt that Eunuch Lee died at the hands of his own people. You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.